Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things, and welcome to episode 118.
Okay, Ben. So, I'm going hard science on us. Are you ready?
Yeah.
118. There are 118 elements on the periodic table.
Perfect.
That's it. Boom. Mic drop. We're done.
We've led up to this moment.
Oh, for so long. Well, yeah. So everybody knows the periodic table is ginormous. They learn about it in like high school chemistry most of the time. And vaguely people remember that, okay, there's gases on the far left and the far right, and there's a bunch of weird stuff in the middle. Oh, and then there's that little excerpt where there's supposed to be only 2, but there's like 100 all kind of crammed into one little spot. And what I always find interesting about this is you forget them almost immediately. This never enters your day-to-day existence. It's like, who cares about the periodic table, right? Well, out of 118 total elements, I wanted to know one thing specifically. How many of those are real? Because you hear about the real high ones, like, oh yeah, we fabricated a new element for 3
it's only been in the
microseconds.
last 100 years or so that we'd actually synthesized all of the elements where we felt like the periodic table was complete. Like, we figured out what every configuration of all 118 protons in the nucleus is.
Woohoo! Yay! Well, but not all of them are stable, right? And a lot of them will break down or just don't exist in nature or stuff like that. Of the 118, there are only 80 elements that have at least one stable. They call them nuclide. I think I'm saying that right. And so there's the combination of the protons and the neutrons, like in the nucleus of the element. And these elements can have different numbers and still be the same element, which I thought was weird. I didn't know that. For example, tin. Tin has the most stable nuclides. It has 10 different configurations in its nucleus where it is still tin and it's stable. It's not going to decay or create radioactive nonsense and just disappear.
Wow. I wonder if you count all the nuclides, how many elements it was, if you counted each one of those as a different element. Do they have different properties? It's like still tin, but like this kind of tin is better against corrosion and this kind of tin is more malleable.
I don't know. Like, what kind of macro effects does these tiny differences at the atomic level have?
I assume the nuclides are just the number of neutrons in the nucleus?
It's the different configurations. A nuclide is a different configuration of the nucleus with protons and neutrons. And since the elements are defined by the number of protons, then I guess, it's just the number of neutrons in it. So tin has 10 different stable isotopes, and like there's this whole range. Like there's 5 elements that have 7, there's 7 that have 6, 11 that have 5. It goes all the way down until only 26 elements have a single stable nuclide.
Okay.
And that only goes up to lead. It's the first 80 elements. After lead, there is not a single stable element. They're all radioactive or they will spontaneously decay over time.
Huh. Lead tops out the curve of stable elements that don't.
Yes. So if you ever
that
look
either
at
exist naturally in nature or don't have some kind of nuclear radioactive decay.
Yes.
And most of the nuclear elements decay into lead.
Yeah, well, and for a good reason. They're all just falling down the periodic table until they get there.
Interesting. Josh, this past weekend was the Super Bowl. Did you watch it?
Ben, it's the Super Bowl. It's an American holiday. Of course I watched the Super Bowl.
Okay,
and
good.
I did our Super Bowl tradition of making foods that I can't eat anymore. Every year for some reason.
What do you mean can't eat anymore? What is this? This has not been documented on the podcast.
Yeah, since the beginning of the Super Bowl, like all in my life, all I've ever had to eat that whole day. It's kind of like one of those weird holidays where you don't have a meal. You just lay out a bunch of finger foods and you graze on them all day.
Yeah.
And because it's kind of a holiday. And so, forget it. Whatever, normal meals, diet plans, that all goes out the window. It's a holiday.
Right. What are you talking about? Did you get diagnosed with diabetes or something?
No, I didn't get diagnosed. Stop it. I'm just old, Ben. And so every year, for some reason, I forget. And I'm like, I'm going to do a nacho bar. Or I'm going to do like a 7-layer dip. Or I'm going to do hot wings. And we're going to have margaritas. And then it's halfway through the first quarter. And I've eaten a plate full of this food. And I'm getting heartburn and like acid reflux. And like I'm just not feeling great. And every year it's like, why do I forget that I'm 40 years old and I can't be eating this crap anymore?
Yeah, there's this meme that goes around the internet. It's a picture of like that section in the grocery store that's all the like snack cakes, Little Debbie and Hostess and everything on the shelf. And it's like, I remember when this used to look delicious.
I mean, they still look delicious, but you just know I can't eat that.
Yeah. So what was it this year for the Super Bowl snacks?
It was 7-layer dip. I made an amazing, nice, thick 7-layer dip. Half of it was with refried black beans. The other half was with refried regular beans. And then taco meat and salsa and guacamole and sour cream and cheese and chives and black olives. And yes, it was delicious for like 5 bites. And then I started getting acid. I'm like, oh, damn. Like, go get like a drink. Like, get some celery and some ranch to try to like tamp it back down.
Do your kids care about the football game?
No, not at all. Not at all. Honestly, I didn't care very much about the football game because it was, the 49ers and the Chiefs? Man, who cares?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I'm from Arizona and I root for the Cardinals. I am a Cardinals fan. My wife and I both wore all of our Cardinals gear to watch the Super Bowl. And while we hate the 49ers because they're always very good and they're very near us and we play them all the time, we had to root for the 49ers. And I will say, because I saw one TikTok that made me want the Chiefs to lose so badly. And it was the fact that Taylor Swift does not get to discover the magic of football, true love, and a Super Bowl win all in the same year. It wouldn't be fair.
Come on, she's been singing about dating the high school quarterback for decades. She finally got her chance. She just had to do the grown-up version.
Well, and yeah, she dated a tight end, and they won the Super Bowl. And it was like this whole fairy tale thing, but boo. Boo.
She wears short skirts. I wear t-shirts. I kind of want to sidestep the Taylor Swift thing. Like, whatever, that's been done ad infinitum. I don't want to talk about that. But I do want to talk about. Okay, so in the pantheon of sports, there's fandom and then there's sports enjoyment. And, when you're a fan of a team, you'll follow that team. Maybe you'll watch them on TV. You'll attend in person. And if your team makes it to the playoffs, your enjoyment kind of increases. But there's a few pinnacle of sporting events that kind of transcend enough that they'll bring in non-fans. Like if you think of the Olympics. Like I'll watch the finals of the Olympics if it's like the Canadians versus the Norwegians. And I've never watched that before just because it's the pinnacle of sporting achievement.
Yeah, I agree.
But like the World Cup, like I don't normally follow soccer, but just the spectacle of all of the teams from around the world, even if America gets eliminated early on, I'll still follow and decide if I care about the Brazilians versus the French.
Yeah, just pick a team and just go with it.
Right, and the Super Bowl is kind of like that. It's one of those events that just transcends fandom to the point where, like, okay, I'll watch this anyway. Like, I don't care about the Chiefs or the 49ers. I'm not a fan of either team, but I'll watch it and decide who I want to win. So, as I've mentioned in the past on the podcast, I did a thing a long time ago where I stopped watching television. Like, it's been 20 years maybe. Like I don't own television, I don't pay for cable, so I haven't watched like a broadcast television in a long time.
I want to put a bookmark in the conversation right here. We will come back to that comment, but please continue.
The Super Bowl is one of those events that still is just very much trapped in the ways of the past for how you consume it. So I knew it was on, I wanted to watch it, I hadn't planned ahead, which you kind of have to do. It's
like not at a convenient time, and it's on a Sunday evening. Especially your Central Time, right? So it ran late into the night.
Yeah, so I went and Googled it, like how to stream the Super Bowl, and it came up and gave me 6 options. And it looks like it's just click on one of these 6 options and you'll be able to watch it. But no, they're all using the Super Bowl as a gateway drug to try to get you to subscribe to something.
Yep.
Every single option it offered. It offered CBS, Fubo, Hulu Plus Live TV, Paramount Plus, YouTube, and YouTube TV. But they were all red herrings. None of those 6 links, if you click on them, would just be like, okay, now you're watching the Super Bowl. No.
Absolutely not. You have to subscribe to the service. Ben, is this your first time looking into streaming services?
No. And I've tried to do this in the past. Here's the thing, Josh. We're so close to being past this. We're so close to still... For all of our hierarchical structure for how to fund broadcast television, particularly live sports, through selling of commercial airtime to local markets as segmented by broadcast television geographic boundaries. Like, we're so close to being past that, to where it's just citizens of the internet unite and watch a live stream. But they haven't gotten past it yet. There's still these calculations happening where they have to figure out what market you're in and what demographic you're part of so that they can sell the airtime to advertisers.
Ugh, I hate that. It's the worst. Like we need to move on from this weird thing that we have with it. It's not broadcast TV anymore, guys. It's not.
Like if one of those 6 links had a click here to pay $5 to watch the Super Bowl right now, I would have done it. But none of them did. They all wanted me to subscribe to their streaming service.
Yeah. I mean, that's how they get you. We have YouTube TV exclusively because we wanted to watch football, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And that was the most economical thing that we could find. Now, that said, once we had it for the football season, we realized how much utility it was bringing to our lives. And that's probably the number one streaming service that we use now. But still, it's not cheap. Like, I feel like I'm back to paying for cable.
Okay, so this whole season I've been consuming the NFL by the way that the NFL on their official YouTube channel within like an hour of the end of a game will release a condensed version of the football game where they'll only show the plays that either resulted in like a change of possession or a big yardage gain or something like that. And every NFL game is about a 20-minute video.
Oh, that's not a real NFL.
You're right. It isn't real, but I've kind of enjoyed it. So that's the way I've been consuming the NFL this season. So I was wondering if that was going to happen. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to sign up for any of these. I'm just going to try. So here's the thing. I'm just going to try to avoid knowing anything about the Super Bowl for the next 3 hours. And then hopefully they'll release the highlight video on the channel and then I can watch it like it's new. So this is like the Mariah Carey challenge where it's Christmas time and you're trying not to hear All I Want for Christmas Is You. How difficult is it in the year 2024 to avoid any knowledge of what's happening or the outcome of the Super Bowl? Go ahead.
I mean, not impossible, but we're approaching it.
Yeah.
I mean, you would have to avoid every digital device. You would have to avoid every conversation. You would have to avoid overhearing your neighbors because that's what everybody's doing.
Yeah, you got to avoid Twitter and Facebook and even memes. Like there were memes that were already circulating before it was over. There was that Travis Kelce got pulled out of the game and he went over and yelled at the coach and some photographer snapped it. And I don't know how, but they already had the photo up on the internet before the game was even over and it had already turned into a meme that I've seen like 10 different versions of already where he's yelling at the coach for taking him out. You've seen it, right?
I have seen it, of course, yeah. Like the TikTok is blowing up with that because what they did is they split it into 2 pictures. It's just one picture of the coach looking at the team at the field, and you have to swipe it over to see Travis Kelce screaming at him. And then they'll put in like whatever sound clip applies to somebody screaming at somebody else, and it's always hilarious.
I've only seen it as photo memes where it just looks like it's a chance for you to rant about whatever it is. Then the captions are just like, don't you know how to use a roundabout?
No, the one I liked the most was the opening to I can't remember the song, but it's the Viking song where they're just screaming and so like you're looking at the coach and it's
immigrant
just making,
song.
Immigrant song, where they're making that like music going, and then as soon as you swipe it, the screaming starts, and it's just Travis Kelce in his face.
Nice. Yes. Okay. So all that's going on, and I know that doesn't compromise knowledge of the outcome of the game, but like you said, it could be anything, anywhere. Texts, Google alerts. Like if you've ever Googled a team in the past, Google's like, oh, you might want to know what's going on in this game, and it sends you live updates and they just pop up on your phone. Yep. So I did it somehow successfully. Like you said, it's virtually impossible, but I just kind of put my phone aside and just waited a couple hours, and it was like an hour after when I thought was supposed to be the end of the Super Bowl. But you can't even Google to be like, is the Super Bowl over yet?
Nope, because they'll spoil you. Here's the score. Right. Here's the current ball position.
But somehow I did it. I went on YouTube, I went to the NFL channel, and I just clicked on the video and started it without looking at the comments or anything like that. And the highlight video was up within an hour of the end of it, and I was watching it. I'm like, okay, this is it. I didn't have to pay for a streaming service because the NFL itself put up the game within an hour of the end of it because they're incentivized to provide the YouTube video so that the fans don't get all the views of putting up the highlights. So I watched the game like that.
Crazy.
It's so close. It's so close to just being like worth it to not.
That's not how you consume a football game, sir. Like, yeah, you saw all the important plays, but you didn't get the tension of like, you know what it feels like to watch a game for like 15, like a whole quarter and nobody scores. It's just back and forth defensive battle. Like that builds the tension for when the score happens.
It's the TikTok version of NFL football. It's ADHD with all the boring parts taken out and no commercials.
Okay, you mentioned TikTok and football. There is a guy that I subscribe to like halfway through the football season because he was doing exactly what you're talking about. He took all the football games and just the important plays where stuff happened, but he's interjecting sound clips and like little video elements into it when certain things happen, and every time it's hilarious. And I can't even describe it well. I'll link in the show notes, I guess, for the Super Bowl one. But it's just funny things like somebody will fumble the ball and it'll freeze frame, and then a little guy from South Park will pop up next to him like, "You blew it! You had it all and you blew it!"
Nice. Yeah, and that's almost like, I don't know what to call it, augmented reality, but it's kind of high effort on his part. Good on him. We have entered the age of the paywall, Josh. Like, at some point there was this waffly time where corporations were willing to accept a loss at just getting views on their stuff, and no more. Like, all the news sites have gone behind paywalls. Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, The Atlantic, everywhere. Like, you can't get to their articles now. They even stopped giving you like, this is your one free article thing.
Yeah. No, you get like 3 or 4 sentences with a good hook, and then the text just fades out. And like, if you want to keep reading, click here to subscribe.
Yeah. All of the streaming services are starting to crack down on family password sharing. Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu, everybody, they're updating their privacy policies. They're updating their connection policies. Like, this is it.
I don't think this is...
Episode 118, mark it. Like, we have transitioned from the we're trying to get more people stage to the we're trying to get money out of the people that are looking at it stage.
So I don't know if I'd categorize it this way. I think the age of the paywall started in the Bronze Age, when people realized that if I have something that somebody else wants, I can extract value from them for the thing that I have.
I get it. Tale as old as time.
Yeah, there you go.
But
what you're talking about is the wild
internet.
No, it's not the start of the paywall. It's the end of the Wild West of the internet, where everybody was just nobody knew how to monetize it. Everybody was just doing whatever and saw what stuck. And then the corporations came in and replaced all of the mafia bosses in Las Vegas, and they turned it into a money making machine. That's what happened to the internet.
Perfect, just like that. So, yeah, you can't watch the Super Bowl live on the internet without subscribing to a streaming service. I hope there's something on the other end of that.
Oh, and by the way, for everyone that's listening, we do not have the express written consent of the NFL to be discussing the Super Bowl on this podcast. So, NFL lawyers, if you're listening, come get us.
So there was one other big thing happening this week. A year from now, we're going to look back on this and it'll all seem so clear. But right now, we're still in that foggy stage. This podcast has been going on long enough that we've been through multiple presidential elections. The year 2024 is a U.S. presidential election. We're coming up on another one. And for some reason, the country has already decided that we're in a dead heat between the 2 oldest candidates ever in the history of presidential elections.
Okay. What do you want to talk about there? Like, this is.
I don't want to talk about the age. I want to talk about this week. The judge in New York decided against Donald Trump in the civil suit where they were suing him for the fact that his team at his business had been falsifying all of their records to get favorable valuations on their property for the purpose of insurance and taxation for decades.
So
they've just been lying about everything.
Yes. A minor point of correction. They had already decided long ago that he had committed these crimes. All that was being decided here was what the punishment was going to be.
Okay. So, yeah, the judgment finally came out. It was like almost $500 million in money against his company, $355 million of which he's personally liable for, and his sons can't practice business in the state of New York. And then all of these quotes of him sitting there like lecturing the judge about how he's corrupt and just ignoring the justice system and doing what he does. But This is a big deal. He's now had 2 judgments against him. One in a defamation suit related to people that he has been ruled, at least in civil court, to have sexually assaulted, and now lying on real estate dealings. There's still another 4 cases in the various works out in the justice sector. One related to paying hush money to hookers. The charges related to the 6th of January insurrection and everything surrounding the election.
Well, with all this going on, he's also said that he's going to be our first dictator. It's like, I don't know why we're not voting for this guy. Sounds like a real stand-up citizen.
The classified documents that he stole and lied about, and the Supreme Court decision that's going to come out anytime about whether or not he can even be on the ballot in states because of these court cases. What a poop show! Like, how Josh? To continue our rant from last episode about first past the post voting, I mean, this is what we get.
Yeah,
like there is no other option between a guy that might die of old age in office and another guy that's also that old but a criminal.
Okay, so
in every way.
If anybody listens to this podcast, they know that I'm not the most conservative person in the world. But I'm going to set.
I'm conservative, but I don't like this either.
I'm going to set all that aside for a second. I'm going to talk about the logistics of the situation that the Republican Party finds itself in. Okay, what's happening is they're being held hostage by the vocal minority in their far right. They because of first past the post voting. Excuse me. They cannot split the vote. They cannot allow this demagogue to split off and run as an independent or run as whatever party he wants to call himself, because all that's going to do is pull votes from the Republican Party. And all of the other Republican candidates then have no shot. And then the Democrats will just win in a landslide, because you can't have 2 Republican candidates and 1 Democratic candidate because of first past the post voting. Right. So the Republican Party is faced with this decision of, do we completely exile this person? Do we somehow shut them down, cut them off, kick them out of the party entirely, and somehow maintain his voter base without him vocally denouncing the entire party, splitting off and taking all of those voters with him, which he would absolutely do? Or do we swallow the bitter pill and somehow try to incorporate all of this ultra right-wing craziness into our mainstream party talk, because we have to incorporate them or else we're going to lose all of the elections?
You're right. They've decided that to willingly relinquish power is worse than to swallow the bitter pill of radicalism,
which comes back to misaligned incentives in our Congress and our parties. Like, if you truly believed, like, even if you're a conservative person, and if you truly believe that Donald Trump is bad for the country, you are stuck. You have no other choice. It's either vote for him or vote for a Democrat, which is entirely against your ideals. And so
I think it's time for more people to do what Mitt Romney has done and do a principled resignation. Like, yeah, you're giving up power, but you were showing that your principles won't be compromised.
The problem with that is, like, yes, like, oh, we can point to Mitt Romney, even me on this side, like, yeah, he stood up for his principles. That's a stand-up guy. That's the kind of guy I want in the Republican Party, not the kind of guy that is resigning over principles to make room for more of these, like, of the people that are going to toe this party line. That are going to just say all the things that, even if they don't believe them, because that's what the party needs at this moment.
Okay. Well, we've reached this point now where there's been, $500 million worth of civil court judgments against Donald Trump. The criminal cases are coming up. They'll probably all be resolved before the election happens. I don't know. My crystal ball is cloudy on this one, Josh. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. Is he going to be on the ballot? Is he going to get sent to jail? If he doesn't get elected, is the new Republican candidate going to use the power of the executive branch of government to just pardon him? Like, what's going to happen?
So they've actually sidestepped that very well in all of the preliminary debates that they've had on the Republican side, because they asked, if Donald Trump gets convicted and goes to jail, will you pardon him? Every one of them, their answer is, I won't have to, because he won't be found guilty because he didn't commit any crimes. And they completely sidestep the fact that, hell no, he's going to go to jail and he's going to rot there. That's assuming, like, this is my personal conspiracy theory, not the views of the Democratic Party.
That's what I'm asking you to do, man.
Okay. I honestly think if too many of these go bad, he's just going to flee to Russia. Like he's got political connections from all of the favors and the back channel nonsense that he did when he was president, that if things go really bad for him, he's just going to flee the country.
I feel like that's the best case scenario for everyone involved. Like how can we make that happen sooner?
The biggest hope that I have, honestly, in reality, because it doesn't matter what crimes he's committed, like his voters are going to vote for him. What I'm really hoping for is that a handful of important states kick him off the ballot for the reasons, for the constitutional reasons, because then it makes it almost impossible for him to get elected through the Electoral College. That's the only hope that I'm holding out for.
On my way home from church today, I passed a house, and in the driveway was a giant black jacked up pickup truck they'd taken white electrical tape and made on all across the whole side of it like Trump 2024 Take Back America. And
who are we taking it back from? Who are we taking it back from, Ben? This is my problem with
his one greatest talent is that he has enabled people like that to just use him as a cipher where they don't even have to care what he is, what he would do, or what he stands for. He just represents to them unconditionally the idea of victory over their enemies.
All right, this is okay. I don't like this comparison. I'm going to make this comparison deliberately and very carefully. This is exactly the kind of thing that Hitler did. I'm not saying he's a fascist. He kind of is, but I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that Hitler took a bunch of disenfranchised people that had things going bad in their life due to very complex socioeconomic reasons, and instead of trying to fix those problems or solve the root causes, he just galvanized them against the other. It's like, I will make this country better. Your life sucks right now. We promised you so much more, and the American dream is so much more than this, and it's because of them. And then he points at anybody. It doesn't matter. Immigrants coming across from the border, people that are fleeing their terrible murder sprees in their home countries. They're the reason that your life sucks. They're the reason that the American dream is failing you. And you have all of these disenfranchised people who grew up in a society telling them that you can be anything that you want if you try hard enough. And then they have to settle into this mediocre life, and they haven't reconciled that internally to themselves, and they're looking for something to blame, and this person is giving them an excuse. This is the reason that everything is terrible. Elect me and I will fix it. And they buy it because it's easier than looking internally and solving all of the internal issues with yourself.
Yeah. Yes, I get what you're saying. America is so much better off than Germany was after World War I, and they were, languishing under all of the restrictions. I forget what it was called. The judgment that was decided against Germany that they had to pay reparations for causing World War I.
Yeah, it just destroyed their economy.
Right.
But at the same time, that's an abstract concept. Germans post World War I had it way worse than we do, but we didn't experience that. We didn't experience the Great Depression. All we're experiencing now is I see all this fancy stuff on TV that I can't afford, and my rent is 60% of my gross wages. That's what people are complaining about.
I'm going to do this out of order, but I want to transition to a Bad at Logic segment.
Okay.
Josh, there is a law of the internet called Godwin's Law.
Oh, you got me. Oh,
I know.
I started scrolling.
Did you do it on purpose?
I did. I just scrolled
so
down
perfect.
in the notes, and it's here. And yep. I just teed this up for you so nicely.
Here is Godwin's Law, Godwin's rule of Nazi analogies. It's an internet adage that asserts as an online discussion grows longer, the probability of a comparison involving Nazis or Hitler approaches 1.
Yep.
Josh,
guaranteed
you just
if we
did
talk
it.
long enough, we will talk about Nazis.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. So I did some research on the history of this. Godwin was Mike Godwin is an author and a lawyer, and this is way back in the early days of the internet. That just shows how strong of a law this is. Back in the 1990s, he was looking at discussions on Usenet groups. It's just chat boards that are streams of text where people would go on and talk stuff, and he noticed that this seemed to apply. And the problem that he saw with it was that he felt like how when people would start to have a political discussion or any kind of discussion, and the longer it went on, the more likely it was that it would devolve into someone comparing the opposition to Nazi or Hitler. Nazis or Hitler, that he felt like that was doing a bit of a disservice to the people that were victims of that. It says he believed that such comparisons regrettably trivialized the Holocaust. There's another statement of this dating back to the 1950s that's called reductio ad Hitlerum, which is a Latin phrase intended to evoke the idea that there's a logical fallacy at work here, which is reducing an argument to a comparison to Hitler.
I did that, didn't I? I did that earlier.
Kinda, but there's a reason we do this. It's because we need something that represents a superlative, hyperbolic, that we can use as a comparison. And when we want to compare something, our minds naturally go to the highest possible state.
Okay.
So if we want to compare the maximum possible evil, the maximum possible chaos, whatever it is that we think we want to compare hypothetically to, then we go to that.
Yes.
It has become Hitler.
So we have, whenever you're having these discussions, give me an example, scale 1 to 10. You have to define what's 1, you have to define what's 10. And Hitler is just too easy to define 10 as all these bad things on these scales.
Yes. This has become so de facto that Godwin's Law got added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2012. Now, I'm going to take a hard left turn here, Josh.
Okay.
I think we have reached the point in the Bad at Magic podcast where I want to do something very audacious and attempt to coin a new law. One
law
that doesn't exist.
Well, it can't start as a law. It has to start as like a hypothesis, and then it becomes a law when it's not disproven over time.
Okay. That's the audaciousness part of this, Josh. I intend to propose and name after myself a new law that didn't previously exist.
Okay.
Here it is. We're going to call it Rich's Law. As a discussion of something enjoyable grows longer, the probability of a comparison to sex approaches 1.
Okay. Well, I have disclaimers. I think this only works for conversations between two men, for example. I think something in our biology makes... I heard this a long time ago, and I absolutely believe it. All of human history can be defined and explained through the lens of men trying to impress women. Because women have all the sex, and men have to get it from them. And I think
that's Jerry Seinfeld's routine. I love that one.
There you go. Well, so, yeah, that's... So men, like, yes, by something in our biology defines like the penultimate. This is the peak of existence here is sex. So I don't know if this holds true for conversations between women.
I'll read it one more time. As the discussion of something enjoyable grows longer, the probability of a comparison to sex approaches 1. That is Rich's Law. We'll talk about how to codify that into law in a minute. I want to talk about usages of this. Here is the same thing as Godwin's Law, which is when a discussion grows longer, a comparison to Hitler approaches 1. This is as a discussion of something enjoyable. It's the opposite. Instead of trying to find the maximum possible evil to compare something to, this is the maximum possible pleasure that we're comparing something to.
Okay.
I think sex represents the pinnacle of that for human organisms.
Well,
which is
for
why
male
that
human
happens.
Organisms.
I don't think so. I have a counterexample. Have you seen the movie Sister Act?
Oh, man. Long time ago when I was a kid.
Okay. So the conceit of the movie Sister Act is that Whoopi Goldberg is a lounge singer in Vegas and observes a mob crime, and they put her into hiding, and they decide to have her pretend to be a nun in a convent. So you have this Vegas lounge singer that's pretending to be a nun. Hilarity ensues.
There's this scene, classic setup.
There's this scene where the nuns, and sure, this was probably written by men, but 3 nuns and Whoopi Goldberg are in the kitchen together. I think they've snuck some ice cream, and they're eating ice cream, and they're all effervescing about how delicious the ice cream is. And the longer this discussion goes on, they're all trying to come up with superlatives to say how good the ice cream is. Have you seen this scene? I'll put a link in the show notes.
Man, I was a kid. I don't remember.
Well, the hilarious part of it is that they're a bunch of nuns, and one of the nuns says, "This ice cream is better than sunny days," and another nun says, "This ice cream."
They don't have a 10. They don't have anything on their scale of awesome, ultimate cool things to compare this ice cream to.
And then Whoopi Goldberg says, "It's better than sex." Record scratch, silence, cricket chirping. Everyone turns and looks at her, and she goes, "So I've heard."
Nice. Yeah. Way to blow your cover there, Whoopi Goldberg. All right. So this is, I'm going to try to make this a new Bad at Magic thing. All right, yeah. Ben, on a scale of sex to Hitler, where are we here?
Perfect. All right. There's one other thing I want to talk about before we move on this, and that is I want to codify Rich's Law.
Oh, geez.
So how do we do that now? Like, Mike Godwin started doing this back in the 90s. It didn't get codified in the Oxford English Dictionary until 2012. So it took him 22 years.
Well, on the opposite of that,
I'm playing the long game.
Hang on a second. The opposite of that spectrum, Brady Heron on the Hello Internet podcast coined the phrase freebooting, and that became like accepted vernacular across the internet in like a couple of years. So it's a matter of, you know what it is? It's a matter of our listeners getting the word out to all of their friends and family to listen to the Bad at Magic podcast so we can spread the wisdom that is Rich's Law into the ether.
The longer a discussion of something enjoyable goes on, the more likely it is to be compared to sex. You have seen this recently in your feeds. Probably the most prominent version of it is this meme that started on Twitter back in the early 2000s. And the great thing about Twitter is you can just search it and find out when the earliest person to do this was. It goes like this. Here's the template. Yeah, sex is cool, but have you tried garlic bread?
Yeah, and it's just, sex is cool, but have you? And then just fill in anything. And the idea is it can be, I only see this satirically. I've never seen somebody legitimately talking about like, yeah, whatever, sex is fine, but this is what we're after.
I've seen it mixed up with satire and earnestness. Like, yeah, sex is cool, but have you ever aced a job interview and got offered the job you were looking for? Or something like that. You know, people use it as a way to humble brag.
So, yeah, okay. The humble bragging is fine, whatever. But, like, are you going to quit your job just to go chase that high of another, like, perfect job interview? No, of course not.
Yes. But you can see underneath is the same template, which is we want something hyperbolic to represent the maximum possible pleasure so we can compare pleasurable things to that.
Right. No, yes. And that's going to be sex.
So sex is the de facto maximum possible pleasure, and therefore anytime you're discussing something pleasurable, the longer you go on, the more likely that you will compare it to sex.
At least, if nothing else, you're going to use sex in the conversation to define on a scale where the pleasure of this thing is.
Even when it's not something sexy or the kind of pleasure that sex imparts.
All right, Ben, let's do a rapid fire real quick. Scale of 1 to sex. How's it to go 3-0 in a modern tournament?
Ooh. Yeah, I would definitely do a photo meme of that. Yeah, sex is cool, but have you ever gone 3-0 in a Magic tournament?
All right, how about acing a disc golf hole?
Oh man, that's up there. Like you're cheering, hands over your head, shouting out loud, high-fiving your buddies. I'll post a link in the show notes. I saw one this week where a guy was by himself. He'd set up a camera on a tripod. He threw this beautiful high shot that went all the way across the lake and went straight in the basket, and he immediately ripped off his shirt and jumped in the lake in January.
Okay, I'm going to stop asking you these questions because I'm starting to question, like, your sex life because, dude, come on now. Everything I just said doesn't go past a 7 on the scale of 1 to sex. You're having sex wrong, my friend.
All right. Well, here's the challenge for you, Josh. Let's transition to bad at taxes. So, it's February 2024. It's tax season. You're an accountant. We're in the heart of this. I was doing my personal taxes, and I sent you a couple of text messages, and you gave me like those eye-rolly accountant kind of answers. Is there anything in the tax domain that you would use Rich's Law on?
Yeah,
sex is great, but have you ever?
All right. So sex is great, but have you ever sat 3 business owners down in a conference room, explained to them how between them they owe $150,000 to the IRS, and had them thank you profusely on the way out?
Perfect. Chef's kiss. Okay.
Terrible transition, by the way.
On our I can't ace them all. On our subreddit, I forget what we said in 117 about taxes, but then one of our listeners went on the subreddit and kind of agreed with me that it's a bit of a goat rope, that the IRS knows how much you make and then is waiting for you to get it wrong so they can challenge you on it. And of course, you are actually guy. I don't think neither me nor the listener that said this think that that's really the truth, but it still feels bad.
Okay. And like on that subreddit, I had to comment. I rarely comment on the subreddit just because I'm not a social media guy. But that one I had to, like, I couldn't let that slide without a comment. So the conversation was like, the IRS already knows all of this stuff, and like you said, they're waiting for me to do the math wrong so they can call me out on it. That is 100% a misnomer. There's so many things that the common understanding of what taxes are and what taxes really are. And it drives me nuts now that I'm in the know, because I used to think these things, and now these misnomers just drive me nuts. Okay, so first of all, the IRS doesn't know everything, okay? They know the things that are reported to them, and as time goes on, more and more things are being reported to them, but they don't know everything. Listeners, you don't want the IRS to do your taxes. They're going to make all the worst assumptions about you. Now, every once in a while, if you submit a tax return that omits something that the IRS knows about, they will send you back a notice doing exactly what you expect them to do, what you want them to do, what you say you want them to do. They send back a letter that says, okay, here's the tax return that you gave us, and the numbers all the way straight down, and here's the tax return that we calculated. Here's the difference, and here's the extra that you owe. And usually it's because the taxpayer said, or they forgot that they got this form and they didn't give it to us, so we paid their tax return. Or they said they paid a bunch of estimated taxes but didn't. And so then the IRS is like, hey, you claimed this much money that you paid. You haven't paid anything, so you need to pay us now. It's not a notice that you want to get because it's always against you. It's always not in your favor, okay?
I get it. Like if the IRS was making the decisions, why wouldn't they decide in the way that would generate the maximum possible revenue?
Yes. And here's the other piece, is that the IRS knows a lot, but it doesn't know everything, and tax law has nuance. So there are so many tax credits that exist in the world that the IRS just has no idea about. Ben, did you know that you get a tax credit? You get a break on your taxes for the amount of money that you spend on childcare. Did you know that?
I feel like
the
there's
IRS
that
doesn't know that.
Where like you can get all kinds of tax breaks if only you bring them up, but they're not going to bring them up without you. And they're like that dad that's standing there where you say, I can have a tax break because of this. And he crosses his arms and goes, I guess.
That's not how it works. The way that, all right, think about it from the organization. You work for the government. You know better. I have, how many millions of people that are going to send me a form in the mail that's going to tell me how much that they owe in taxes. And I'll tell you right now, as much as people think the IRS is out to get them, they don't have the time or the resources. Like, all of these things go through a computer. And if you get a letter from the IRS, I guarantee it's because you messed up one of the easy things for them to compare. Just like I said before, they have forms that they get from outside sources.
They got the stuff that they know for sure, and if you get that wrong, then they're going to dig.
Exactly, because the IRS computer system is very good at matching, does line 5 agree with what I expect line 5 to be? If the answer is no, then it spits out a letter. People don't even see it. It just gets sent to you by robots. But there's so much nuance to tax code. There's a reason that accountants exist in this industry. There is a demand for us. Because without us, like, you're going to miss out on all these things. The simplest one was the child tax stuff. The IRS has no idea how much you paid in child care, but if you tell them, hey, this is how much I paid in child care, you will get a fraction of that off of your taxes because that's written in the tax code. If you have a business, how many expenses did you incur? They know how much you made. They have no idea how much you spent. You get to take all that off your business income as opposed to paying the self-employment tax for the whole number. It is on you to tell the IRS not how much you made, but how much you spent and how much you apply for.
I want to do a bit of reducto ad absurdum here, which is reduce things down to the level of absurdity.
Okay.
what you were talking about, what we were talking about earlier, is that we have this political system that exists and government that does the things that government is supposed to do, to maintain order and provide security and those kinds of things. And that takes money to do. And so they need money. So there's just kind of unbounded demand for money. But then politicians, in order to please their constituents and for, maybe legitimate virtuous reasons, want to incentivize certain things within a society, and the way they can do that is by tempering the tax code in order to incentivize certain behaviors, like you mentioned, like having children.
Yes.
If you incentivize childcare in the tax code, you make it easier for people to have children. You're then using your political system to try to encourage people to have children or make it easier for them to take care of them when they do. That's one example. There's infinite examples, which is why our tax code then becomes so complicated. Because
this goes back to misaligned incentives, okay? Because like you're talking about, there's political motivations to make things go one way or another.
Right.
For example, the opposite end of the spectrum is all this corporate stuff. When Trump became president, famously they enacted a bunch of tax law that benefited businesses very, very heavily. One of those was meals at restaurants became 100% deductible for a couple of years. That was huge. That was huge for the restaurant industry. That was huge for businesses because a lot more businesses started buying food from restaurants because they could deduct it on their taxes and restaurants made more money. Hooray, good for everybody. But there's also negatives to this. There is a lot of lawmakers that have incentives or have stakes in big businesses. And so then they're starting to make it easier to be a big business and reduce the tax burden on businesses. Did you know this country used to have a 90% corporate tax rate? And it wasn't that long ago. It was like in the mid-1900s, like 50, 60, 70 years ago. They had 90% corporate tax. So if you were a corporation and you had net income at the end of the year, you had to pay 90% in tax on that net income. Right now, the corporate tax rate was jacked down and down and down because of political pressure. Now it is 20%. And this is like the business side is like, yeah, we get to keep all of this money. We can distribute it to our shareholders. Whereas before, when you had a 90% income tax, they didn't want to have any net income at the end of the year. It's like, crap, we have made too much money. We need to reinvest. We need to get this out of our coffers and spend it on stuff. We need to upgrade our equipment. We need to pay our employees more. We need to send out Christmas bonuses. We need to do something because anything that's left in the checking account on December 31st is going to get taxed at 90%, and I don't want to pay the government.
Yeah. So we have this tension of needing money to do the functions of government, but then also wanting to put holes in that. I don't know the right term to use, but use economic incentives in reverse to incentivize things that you do want to happen in the country. So you need money, but you don't want it. You want to give it back to the people or let people keep it for the right reasons. And then there's this push-pull that creates a lot of complexity that gives rise to accountants.
Well, yeah.
So you're our champions. You're our advocates against this overwhelming complexity.
And here's what happens. This is the most fun thing that happens is that the tax law comes out in Congress. They aren't lawyers. They aren't. Well, a lot of them are lawyers. They're not tax lawyers and they're not accountants. And so they'll say, "Oh, we are going to create a credit for meals. They are now deductible at 75%." Then that goes to the IRS. Like, okay, we have a new law. Meals are deductible at 75%. How do we capture that? Like, what are the rules around it? Like, what information do we have to put out? How do our forms have to change? What education? There's so many nuance, like, how do we actually implement this legislation that then becomes like, okay, now me as the accountant, I get, okay, here's the tax law change, and here's all the ways that the IRS is implementing it. And so here are all the steps that we have to take and all the boxes that we have to check to make sure you actually get this thing.
There's a third competing factor on this interaction, and that is that people want to keep their money. And yeah, they want the benefits of government, but they want somebody else to pay for it. Like, nobody's going to virtuously just like donate money to the government because I want policing and I want roads and I want the military and I want.
My kids are the most liberal kids that go to their elementary school because they talk about that. Because we're in the car driving someplace, but like, why does everybody complain about taxes? I'm like, because they don't want to pay the government. But me and my family, I tell them we don't complain about taxes because I like the things that taxes do. Like, it's like, what do taxes do? I'm like, we are driving on a road that was paid for with taxes. You go to a public school that was paid for with taxes. We have police and fire and infrastructure and bridges and electricity and all the wonderful things that are not living in a third world country because of taxes.
Yeah. So then you have people looking for every possible way that they can. So you have politicians creating loopholes in the tax code in order to incentivize behaviors that they think will please their constituents or incentivize the kind of behaviors that they want in the kind of society that they're trying to promote. And then you have people who don't want to pay taxes who are trying to use all of those, even the ones they may, that are on the fringe of whether or not they're entitled to them or the amounts, or hiding other things through those loopholes and so on. And then that creates more rules and then more checks and balances, and it just creates this complex pile of problems. So enter all of that, and now you want an individual person to still be able to figure this out. So that's where I was. I had just last year gone on a military deployment, which exempted part of my income. I have kids in college. I just have all the usual life complexity of probably an average person. I don't have a home mortgage. I don't run my own. Well, we kind of run our own. Okay, it's complex. So I did what I do every year, and I go to TurboTax. Part of the reason I go back to TurboTax is because they kept all my information from last year, and it's going to save me 2 hours of data entry to just be able to log back into my same account and reuse it.
Ah, yes, the ecosystem problem.
Yeah. I don't know why the IRS hasn't just produced their own version of TurboTax. It's probably in their bet. I get that they're going to, but they haven't done it yet.
They're going to. In the next 2 years or something, you're going to go to the IRS website and you can file a tax return.
I like that there's a business out there that's trying to please me as a customer. I don't imagine the IRS is going to do that, but I'm willing to consider their possibility. But when I go to TurboTax, they're like, hey, we're going to help you, and here's the things, and we'll just ask you a few simple questions, and here's a nice animation, and here's a cutesy thing, and here's a reminder of how much value we're giving you. Fine, I'm happy with all that. But all along the way, they're doing this other thing where they're trying to upsell me. Here's some insurance you can buy. Here's more access to professionals you can get. Here's more assurance that you're going to get all the maximum possible deductions. Here's more and more and more and more. And as a member of the active duty military, they offer free access to their software, but they hide it so deep that you can't even get to it.
Because they want to say that they're giving you free access, but they don't want you to use it for free. That's ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I'm doing all of that, and then I have a new problem I've never had before. So the IRS, probably because of some data breach compromise that they got scrutinized for, is instituting a new thing where they issue you an identity protection pin.
This is not a new thing. I will tell you two things about the identity protection pin. Are you ready? One, it's been around forever. I have one.
I get it. This is the first year I've run afoul of it.
Stop it. I'm going to do my IP pin thing. Okay. Two things. One, I had my identity stolen and somebody filed a tax return fraudulently in my name to get a refund. And so now I had to tell the IRS, hey, that wasn't me. I am me. And so they send me in the mail every year since 2015 a 6-digit number that I have to include with my tax return or my tax return isn't valid. Okay?
Wait, before you go on to the second thing.
Okay.
That blows my mind that someone stole your identity and used it to get a refund on taxes. What, did they just file a fraudulent tax return that said the government owed them a bunch of money?
Yeah, basically.
Huh. Wow. What a scam.
That's a real thing. If you can get somebody's social security number, that's just free money.
Wow.
Anyway.
That blows my mind. Okay, what was the second thing?
So this is the check now. They send me in the mail a number because IRS doesn't email anything.
Again, the mail has become the last bastion of trust in our society. Where are you physically located?
I'm one of the old school people where the government told me, because I submitted a form to them saying that previous tax return was fraudulent, and they came back and said, okay, we will issue you a PIN every year. And they send it to me in the mail. The other side of that, if you decide, hey, I want an extra layer of security on my tax return, I want to voluntarily have an identity protection PIN with my tax return every year, they don't mail that to you. You're required every calendar year to go to their website and pull it down from your portal or your account or whatever they have. And that's the only way you can get it. And Ben, that is such a problem for me as a tax preparer because I am frozen. I am dead stop. Like you, 90-year-old woman who has no idea what you just applied for. I need you and you alone to go to a website and download this 6-digit number.
Oh, yeah. Trust me, Josh. I did 3 years of tech support. I understand this so hard. Okay. I'll give you the short version. Try to keep it entertaining. I decided to e-file my taxes. I got to the end. I transmitted it through TurboTax to the IRS. They said it had been accepted, and then it was fine. Then, 2 hours later, I get a text message and an email saying the IRS had rejected my tax return. So then I went into it, and this is where the TurboTax software broke down because it wasn't good at handling the IRS error codes.
Okay.
It didn't send me back to the right place in all of my documentation to what I needed to correct or whatever. So I'm kind of reading through the help menus and looking at the error code, and it says that I needed an IP PIN. I'd never gotten one before, so I just clicked on the link. It took me to the IRS website. They offered 4 possibilities of third parties that would conduct the identity verification so the IRS would issue me a PIN. So I used one called ID.me. I was on a website, then it had me go to my phone and take a picture of my driver's license. I'm imagining a little old lady trying to do this. It's going to be a nightmare. Take a picture of my driver's license, then hold up the camera and do a selfie, and then it compared the photo on my driver's license to the photo of the selfie and used some kind of AI to determine if I was the same person, and then gave the digital thumbs up, then told the IRS that, then they sent me the IP PIN. I put that in my taxes and retransmitted. It failed again. This time I noticed that the error message didn't say that the filer was the one that needed IP PIN. It said it was a dependent. I assumed they meant my wife, so I made her do that thing.
Oh, no. You just signed up for PIN numbers that you have to put in from now until the end of time, sir.
Oh, yeah. And this is a problem with the interface because TurboTax isn't giving me a clear. They're just saying a problem exists, but they're not saying what the problem is. So I'm trying to solve it, but I don't have enough information to really solve it. So now my wife puts in the IP PIN and I retransmit it and it fails again. And apparently my son, who's living in our house, who I'm claiming independent, had an IP PIN from a previous year when he'd submitted it, and he was the reason it failed. So I resubmitted my tax return 3 times, and now 3 people in my household have IP PINs that we're doomed to use forever, only because I didn't have enough granularity in the error message about what I needed to correct.
Okay. I'm going to take that. That's a classic story of failing to file a tax return because of errors that you can't interpret correctly. Can I tack on? Can I add one of my own anecdotes?
Sure.
Okay, from our side, we have super advanced tax software. And just like TurboTax, it's just different, made by different manufacturer. It has different strengths and weaknesses, okay? But the way that the IRS accepts e-files is via XML. And if you're a tech nerd, you got all excited. Ooh, XML actually gets used in the real world. Yes, it does. What's really funny about this is we've been filing a bunch of business tax returns. There are businesses that have to file their own tax returns, okay? And there's a form that the IRS has said, this is great. I love this so much. This is classic government. Everyone, you have to submit this form, 7203, with all of your business tax returns this year. And then all the tax software people went, great. Where's the XML schema for us to actually translate that and transmit it to you electronically? And they said, we don't have one.
So scan a PDF.
That's exactly what happens. Our software produces the form, and then the error message in the software says, the IRS does not accept this form electronically. You need to print it, then recalculate the tax return, turning this form off, upload that form as a PDF into this, and then send it to the IRS.
That's terrible. That's why the IRS hasn't released their tax software yet.
Yeah, for stuff. Okay. I'm not an IRS fanboy, but I have to give them a little bit. I have to defend them a little bit because Congress screws them over constantly. For example, there is open legislation right now that would change the tax rules for 2023. Ben, I've already filed over 100 tax returns for 2023, and there's still
would
legislation
that invalidate all the ones
change
you've already filed?
If the legislation goes through, we would have to go back and look at every tax return that we filed and do the math.
There should be a statute of limitations where they're not allowed to change the current tax year after a certain date. January or
you
something
go stand
like
in front of Congress and tell them the things that they're allowed to do and not do.
it, that's the only rule of government, is that there are no rules. We'll talk about that later on. Okay, I want to wind down the discussion about taxes. You said something to me as we were talking about this, where you were describing a situation in your job. We don't have to talk about the exact situation, where your customers or your fellow workers were saying something and you had to bite your tongue to prevent yourself from involuntarily laughing at how ridiculous what they were saying was. I love this idea. I wonder if there's a ratio of this. Like, what lines of work do you have to withhold involuntary laughter the most? Where someone's saying something to you that's so absurd that you're like, you got to be kidding me. I can't believe you're actually saying this.
I had a guy that paid for an hour of my time. He paid $200 to sit in a room with me and explain his, like, okay, I've solved taxes. I will never pay taxes again. And I'm going to run it by you and make sure it's all cool.
Was it the 19th Amendment thing or whatever?
No. Oh, the sovereignty thing? No. Go away. No, this guy was like, all right, so I'm going to create a business, right? I'm going to be a business that sets up trips for people. And then I will set up trips for myself. And then all of those expenses are expenses on my business. And then that will reduce my income from my job. And then I won't have any income and I won't pay any taxes.
Wow, man, you just found the perfect loophole.
I stared like you did it. You solved taxes. All the hundreds and thousands of people that, like the lawyers, the PhDs that write these codes, man, you found the loophole. I can't believe it. You did it. Congratulations.
He wanted to pay $200 to get a pat on the back, and he didn't get it, did he?
No, he did not. Like, I started that conversation like I do with every client, where I'm leaning forward, I'm fully engaged, making good eye contact, taking strict notes with my legal pad. I ended that conversation, leaned all the way back with my feet on the desk, like, dude, like, you have no idea what you're talking about.
At some point, you're just physically biting your tongue, like, I can't even.
Yeah, my demeanor, like, decreased over the conversation. And then when he wound down after he was explaining his scheme, I was like, okay, let me explain to you, like, the 150 ways that doesn't work, starting with the most obvious.
All right, Josh, I want to transition immediately to well, let's talk about what we're reading first, and then we'll go into our main segment, because I want to leave some time for it, because I think it's going to be a good one. Where are you at in the Wheel of Time?
I'm in book 7, A Crown of Swords, and it's awesome.
All right, I will advance your indicator on your progress chart.
I actually lost a little bit of reading time because I've been telling my son about the climactic third act in book 6, the Battle of Dumais Wells, which is so amazing. I'm going to spoil it because it's just so great. And I'd been building up to that, like talking to him every once in a while. He's like, can I listen to it when that happens? And it's like the chapter of the book where it happens is 1 hour long. But I don't have an hour to just sit down with my son and listen to this book. So it was like 4 days it took for us to listen to that. And so it took 4 extra days to finish book 6 than it should have.
Wait, has he read any of the rest?
Nope.
Huh.
Not at all. Yeah, he listens to it every once in a while if we're driving in the car and I'm like, hey, do you mind if I listen to my book? He's like, sure, go ahead. And then I'll like give him the breadcrumbs to like catch him up to what's going on. Because he doesn't know the whole impact of it or whatever.
I love this about your son. That he's kind of malleable and accepting, where he's just like, okay, drop me in the middle of page 743 out of a 40,000 page story.
All right, so this one was awesome because we're halfway through the series, and our main character Rand is a man that can channel the one power, which is bad because if you're a man that can channel the power, you're doomed to go insane and then just start killing everybody around you. It's just a mechanic of the magic system in the story. Okay, men are not allowed to channel. Women can channel the power, and they have classically for thousands of years hunted down men who could channel and wipe them off the face of the earth. Okay, so now we have our protagonist Rand, who is kidnapped by women that can channel, and like he is the protagonist. He's the savior of the world. We need to save him from these people who have kidnapped him. And so our other protagonists raise an army to try to save him. And it's this giant battle where there's 30 women that can channel against 40,000 ground troops, and they're just at a stalemate. They're just in a circle, in a defense, holding their own, and nobody can get into them. But then, in previous books, Rand had started a school where he was bringing in men who could channel to prepare for the last battle against the ultimate evil. And he had, at that point, hundreds of men who could channel that they were training to be weapons that found him, randomly showed up and decided, oh no, we're not defense, we're weapons. And so the rules of warfare changed entirely with this one climactic battle. where 100 of his soldiers, they called Ashaman, the men who can channel, that are trained to be weapons, show up and lay absolute waste to 40,000 people in the matter of minutes. And they describe this carnal, this just churn and just meat grindery, like these guys were just standing in a line, and as fast as they could look from one person to the next, that person would explode and they would just move on. And
gross.
Well, but that's the thing. Imagine,
have they gotten to that part in the Amazon series yet?
No, and I said this when the Amazon series was first. When the Amazon series was first announced, I probably said on this podcast, like, I just hope that they get enough funding and enough seasons to get to the Battle of Dumai's Wells.
Okay.
But this is the reason it's so important to me, and this is one of my best scenes in all of the books, is imagine, Ben, that you're living in a world that has classic fantasy medieval battle tactics. Like, you've got your cavalry, you've got your archers, you've got your infantry and your pikemen, and this is how war works. Until this guy shows up and just with 100 guys.
He brought the proverbial gun to a knife fight.
Yes. And war is forever changed in this universe because of that battle.
It's the wheel of time. Look what happened after the invention of nuclear weapons or the cannon or gunpowder or whatever. It's
the invention of cannons happens 2 books from now. It's like book 9 or 10, I believe, that one of our protagonists realized that fireworks tipped over work really well in battle.
What a brilliant central theme Robert Jordan had at the heart of his creation. It was his killer feature. Like, just riffing on the idea of that things happen in a cycle and we get settled into a certain kind of warfare, and then someone has some type of innovation that changes all of the assumptions and throws out all of the traditional balance of power.
Over in the background, this is not even a plot point, but in the background of these books, our protagonist Rand also started a school because he feels bad he's going to destroy the world as part of his legacy. And so he's building this school where he's bringing in scholars and he's fully funding it, like, just make the world better. Like, that's their whole task. All these smart people, just make the world better. And over the course of all of these books, from like book 4 until the very end, you see this guy in the background that at first he's working on this thing that's got fire and copper, and it started steaming and making a loud noise before it almost exploded, and he had to like turn it off, and they have no idea what's happening. And at the end, in the background of one scene, you see a fully working steam engine hauling like 4 or 5 wagons, like from one city to the other.
I love it. Okay, dang it, Josh. I might keep reading these.
All right, keep reading. Ooh, Ben, what are you reading right now?
Okay, so I read a novel since the last time we talked, Josh, and I want to tell you about why.
Okay.
So I listened to a podcast called Dear Hank and John, which is Hank and John Green,
very
famed
smart guys.
Internet celebrities and authors and the like. And almost as an offhanded remark, and you could debate his intention, but John Green, whose writing I enjoy and who I admire as a creator, said something offhanded like, I can't remember exactly the wording he used, but he named the title of a book and said something to the effect of, I wish I had written that book. It was the ultimate compliment. It was, I saw someone else's craft and was so impressed by what they had done that I wish I had done something that interesting, that beautiful, that towering of an achievement.
High praise.
That got my attention. Like when John Green says, I wish I had written this book, I'm like, what's the book? So I went and looked it up. The book is called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin.
Okay.
The phrase Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is a quote from Shakespeare's Macbeth, from the full of sound and fury speech. It's not about Shakespeare. This is not a YA novel. This is an adult novel. The main plot is that it is a group of 3 friends who drop out of school at MIT and Harvard to start a video game startup company and produce video games.
Okay.
And I agree with John Green. It's an amazing accomplishment. And to try to distill it down to a few plot points doesn't feel like it's doing it justice. There's one point where 2 of the characters are estranged from each other, and then it transitions to in-game of their massively multiplayer online role-playing game that they've created that's set in the Old West based on the Oregon Trail, and the characters are now interacting with each other in the context of the game and resolving their real-world problems through their friendship in the game.
Oh, that's cute. Did they know they each other were? Or is it the classic video game
No,
where you're friends
they
with
don't know who each other
Of course, that's a classic trope in all these gaming animes where it's like, oh, we're friends in this game and I have bitter enemies in real life.
Yeah. It's Sleepless in Seattle. Or no, You've Got Mail. It's that. Through the abstraction of the internet, you are able to get away from the things that are causing conflict in your relationship and realize that you like each other.
Oh, if you just get over yourselves. Jeez.
The book's amazing. Okay, it's decidedly adult, so don't pick it up. And I mean,
you keep saying that. Like, what is this graphic sex described in the book?
A little bit. There's abortion. There's suicide. There's
So don't hand it to your 10-year-old in 5th grade, but definitely read it for yourself.
Yeah, and the author did a surprising amount in getting into like what's it like as inside of a production company to do something like produce a video game. Like what are the production, what's the programming, what's the vision, and what's the discrepancy between having an idea for a brilliant game and translating it into art, games as art. Just so much interesting stuff going on, and I see why John Green admired the book. So Tomorrow by Gabriel Zevin. Good book, recommended if you're interested in any of that kind of stuff I talked about.
I've got Audible credits that are starting to pile up because I haven't bought any new books because for some reason I decided to read a 13 novel series for the 15th time. So maybe I'll go get that one.
I had a few that were piling up. So I also picked up Liar's Poker by Michael Lewis because I love him. And I'm reading it. And it was his first book. It's kind of about like his job with Solomon Brothers and Merrill Lynch as an investment banker back in the 80s. Can't recommend it. It's good if you like his writing. It kind of is helping anchor some ideas in my mind, like what's the difference between the stock market and the bond market and mortgage securities and those kinds of things. But it's fine. Josh, for our main segment today, we're going to talk about Arcane League of Legends on Netflix.
Yes.
It came out in 2021, November-ish.
It came out in 2021, and I think it came out in November 21. I watched it in like December of 21 or January of 22, and since then I've been hounding you to watch it.
That's strong. We've maybe talked about it 3 times, but okay.
So, yes, and the reason that I tried to sell you on this show is because it had absolutely nothing to do with like almost the so there's so much to talk about here in the meta, not about the show, but just all the things that are surrounding the show that are so fascinating about the company that made this a reality.
Okay, let's talk about that first.
Okay, so before we even start, have you ever played Warcraft 3? It's a real-time strategy game on PC.
Yes.
Okay. There was a mod. There was a custom map that some guys made called Defense of the Ancients, Dota. If you've ever heard the word Dota, that's what they're referring to. And it was a custom map that you would download and you would play in this game. And it was totally unlike anything Warcraft 3 had ever done. Have you played that?
It was just the perfect dual battlefield where you have one player at one end, another player at another end. And you could just repeat this particular battlefield over and over.
Is that what you're asking or is what you're saying?
Is that what it was?
No. It was basically the prototype of League of Legends. It was this idea where you didn't control anything except one hero character. And then the hero character had specific abilities that you would level up through the course of the game. And you had an overarching goal that you would work towards.
So Warcraft 3 was the genesis of League of Legends because there was a particular fan-made map that showed that there was a new style of gameplay that would be interesting and fun.
The guys who made that map formed a video game company called Riot Games. And they made League of Legends. This was the first of a whole slew in a brand new genre of video games called MOBAs.
Massive online battle arena.
Multiplayer online battle arenas, yes. The idea is the same thing. You have a team of 3 to 5 people, and you're competing against another team of 3 to 5 people. And it's symmetrical. The entire game is symmetrical, so the only variables that are entered in are the players and what they do and the decisions that they make.
What heroes you choose and then what decisions you make in game.
Yes. Not only that, but I have played League of Legends. It's notoriously toxic. Like, don't just go play it for fun. Like, the people that are in there are awful. They're terrible people. But there's a reason that they're terrible people. Is because
let's take a tangent on this real fast, because I feel like online gaming has this huge barrier to entry that I've failed to get over several times, where like if the company doesn't carefully craft a new user experience where they kind of isolate you from those toxic elements, it can turn off a new player so fast. I remember trying to do an online first-person shooter after I'd played casually at home with some friends, and it was just the level of play was so much higher that I immediately quit and never went back.
So they try to do that by they have ranking systems in the game. The better you do, the higher rank you go, therefore playing other characters of similar skill level. That goes a long way to try to make it easier. But the voice chat is always the problem. Like we talked about this, we talked about Magic Online versus Magic Arena. If you're able to communicate with other players, you're going to run into people who are just using that screen of anonymity that the internet provides them to be the worst versions of themselves.
It's really bad. It almost makes you wonder, like, what was the outlet for this side of people before all of this happened? Where you just have someone that maybe goes to school or work and figures out a way to exist in society, but when you strip all that away and put them in an online battle arena, they just become a toxic, horrible human being, like really bad road rage guy in game.
That's a psychological thing that we can explore on another podcast. Is how
Sure.
anonymity, the guarantee of anonymity, changes your behavior to other human beings. It's remarkable the things that you will do when you're
okay.
When you're not accountable.
So
for it.
you tried to play League of Legends, but you ran into a bit of this.
No, I just played it for a while and then just.
How long is a while?
3 or 4 months, probably.
Okay, I have a question that came up. So Arcane is this 9-episode, 45 minutes per episode animated series that came out in November of 21 that's based on the lore of this game that came from a map that was created for World Warcraft 3 that became Riot Games spinoff. Okay. The gameplay of League of Legends is just continue to this same map in this same arena and just executing new strategies iteratively until you zero in on what are the best characters, what are the best strategies, what are the best teams, getting your teams, and it gave rise to esports. Like, this is the biggest game in esports. Like, they'll feel.
This is part of what I wanted to talk about with Riot Games, because the difference between Riot Games and every other video game company that has existed is they looked beyond the purview of just creating the game, okay? They were looking at the world in general. They created an esports league for League of Legends, and they poured millions of dollars into, we're going to make this a real thing. There's going to be real prizes. There's going to be on real TV channels. Like this, we're going to make this a thing. We're going to make this sport. Not only that, but that's outside of the game. That has nothing to do with the video game that they created. In addition,
and it lends itself pretty way to observing by third parties. Like, I've watched several dozen videos on YouTube of just watching people play this game. It's kind of exciting to watch.
They do a good job with spectating and making it
announcing.
A good experience to watch from the outside. Yes, that is true. They've also funded things that have no right for a video game to fund. My number one listened to song from 2022, I think, was from KDA, which is a K-pop group that was 100% created, funded, like start to finish, by Riot Games.
Okay.
They have 5 actual Korean women that sing very, very well, but then in
all of linked that in the show notes in the past because you brought it up.
All of the music videos for that group, they substitute the actual singers for digital avatars of heroes from League of Legends. Like, it's this cross-pollination trying to suck people into these things.
Okay, so here's my question for you, Josh, and we need to get into the actual story of the of the animated series. Okay. This is just an online battle arena. Like, it's the Roman Colosseum. People come here to observe heroes clash, but you never change the boundaries of the Colosseum. It's still just a round circle with people sitting around watching the thing happen. How is this a vehicle for lore? Like, I get that there's 180 different heroes you can choose from, but are there cutscenes? How are they transmitting lore to the fans of the game?
So they predominantly do it through cutscenes released outside of the game. Whenever they introduce a new character, they will have a handful of YouTube videos coming out associated with that character to give you an idea of their strengths, their weaknesses, and what they're all about. People want to feel vested in these characters.
This is fascinating to me that there's a game production company that's producing content that isn't actually part of the game to promote the game. So they'll put a new character that has, whatever they look like and whatever their abilities are, and then they come up with a story behind all that, and they produce a bunch of videos that are like on YouTube or whatever that aren't even in the game. And then you as the fans will go out and watch those?
Yeah, some of them might be in the game, but they put them out on their website like, hey, we're going to release this new hero in a couple of weeks. Here's this whole deal. And then they'll have the videos.
That's crazy.
Just to psych you up for it.
That's the experience of consuming a game has transcended the boundaries of the game itself.
Yeah. And I'll tell you right now, we're talking about this game in this game studio. Listeners, if you've never heard of League of Legends, if you have no intent of ever playing this game, Arcane is still 100% worth your time.
Okay, good. Great transition.
Yes, you need to know nothing about League of Legends to enjoy Arcane.
Apparently they said the lore that we've created for this multiplayer online battle arena is good enough that it's deserving of the treatment of getting a full animated series. Netflix agreed to back it. They started writing it. They produced this thing and released it into the world.
Not just an animated series, but a ridiculously overfunded animated series. This is longer. So by runtime, it is longer than a Disney movie, but it has these 9 episodes had a $100 million budget.
It blew me away, Josh. The animation, you could see the influence of Sony Pictures Animation Spider-Man Spider-Verse series. Like, they just had this eclectic, interesting art style, and there were points. I've never done this before on an online series, Josh. I would just pause it and stare at a single frame and just be like, this is amazing.
So I've watched a ton of not just behind the scenes, but of professional CGI animators discussing and talking about Arcane and how like the techniques that they use, and like it's just pinnacle animation. For first of all, they're just doing everything right when it comes to animation, and then second, yes, it has this truly unique art style where it looks like everything is almost an oil painting come to life. But at the same time, they incorporate these awesome 2D effect elements that overlay.
It's this weird mixture of 2D and 3D animation. It's detailed, it's beautiful, it's colorful. There's themes, like the overworld is like bright and airy and open, and the underworld is kind of claustrophobic and dark. Certain characters have visual themes to them, like their color patterns and schemas, and it was a visual spectacle, and that's just the visual part. Then there's the music. Like they commissioned unique. There's a Imagine Dragons song over the opening credits. That's an absolute banger. And at some point, Imagine Dragons are characters in the show.
So that was. That song is Enemy. It was released as a single for this show from Imagine Dragons.
Yeah. The voice acting, primo, top-notch talent. The writing blew me away. I was just even though you told me it was good, you didn't say the right buzzwords to turn me onto this. I still thought it was going to be amateurish, like all my experience with animated stories has been up to this point. I wasn't expecting a $100 million production. Yes,
this story, for me specifically, I love this show for the characters and just how well crafted and real everybody in this series feels. And then second, it's the art style. Like, art style is phenomenal. It's a visible, spectacularly amazing thing. I don't even have the words right. But the storyline, man, the characters and how they interact, and like,
let's get into it, because this is the interesting part. And listeners, if you haven't watched it, you don't intend to watch it, but you're just hanging in there because you like to hear Josh and I talk about stuff. Now we're going to get into it.
Man, go watch it. I cannot say this enough. Like, this is one of those things. Don't let us spoil it. If you have Netflix and you haven't watched this, go watch it right now.
Time for a spoiler alert. Okay, so unpredictably, you've got the monomyth going on here. You know, there's several characters that are all on arcs that are calling them to action. They've all got different things that are calling them. You've got Violet, she goes by, I think. Mm-hmm. There's Powder, who later becomes Jinx. There's Victor. There's Jace. There's a few others, debatable, but there's those 4 main characters that all have their story arcs that are happening.
Our antagonist, our bad guy, that's God, what's his name? Not Cisco. Silco. There it is.
Silco.
Oh, he is I don't care. I don't care. Silco's the best character in this show. Period. I'll fight you.
Okay, let's fight.
Yes.
I like Silco. I think you identify with him. At first, I mistakenly thought he was the Joker. I thought he was a chaotic evil character. And there's a point later on in the story where he says something that made me go, oh, I get it. He is lawful evil. And I think that's why you like him.
Yeah. All right. Let's do. I'm going to try to do the world's shortest plot synopsis.
Okay. Well, this is 3 acts. There's 9 episodes. They aren't divided evenly 3 and 3, but there's definitely clear act structure here.
Right. In the first act, we have the show opens with this. All right. So there's 2 cities. There's Piltover and then the Undercity. And the Piltover is like the rich people, and they've got all the technology and all the great things going for them. And they got there because they're exploiting the crap out of the people that live in the Undercity.
Right. So immediately you're like, okay, classic class warfare plot, is your main motivating force.
Yeah, I'm going to mix some of the timelines because you don't learn this at the beginning, but you have Vander and you have Silco who are partners and they're blood brothers and they are 100% focused on each other. And they're like, we are going to rise up. We are from this downtrodden underclass and we're going to take it to the streets and we're going to overthrow this corrupt system. And this is the whole show is built on this conflict is that Vander saw the violence that was happening. He saw these 2 little girls whose parents had died in the uprising that he had orchestrated. And where Silco went, these are the casualties of war that we have to accept. We've got to change the system. Vander went, it's not worth it. And he threw his gloves down. He scooped up the 2 little girls and he broke off from Silco. And that was like just those
but
two.
That's a flashback. When we start in, the girls have now grown up. They're starting to feel some of the same conflict that led Vander to start the uprising in the first place, and he hasn't adequately been able to transmit to them that it's not worth it. He's trying.
All right, so they're like teenagers, right? And so Vi and her friends are all about that age, but Powder's still younger. Powder's like 3 or 4 years younger than them, and Vi is on this cusp.
Guys, wait up.
Well, yeah, but Vi, the older one and the leader of this little group, she is starting to see the fringes of it. She's starting to have the emotional maturity to realize how much bigger this whole thing is. And Vander, the entire time, is trying to mentor her through this change and make her realize that, yes, we live in this system and it sucks, but there's reasons. And he's trying to mentor her into understanding why he made the decision he made.
Yeah, but he's still teaching her to be a pretty good fighter. Like, he's kind of having it both ways here. Like, yeah, he's teaching her not to fight, but he's not doing the Miyagi thing where, like, martial arts is only for self-defense. Like, he's teaching her to kick it.
Okay, he's teaching her to defend herself in an undercity that is riddled with crime. And she's a teenage girl. She's going to need those skills.
Okay.
That's practical, but he's mentoring her on the idea of the class warfare. Yeah, Piltover has got everything and we don't, but there's like trying to change that is not going to be worth it, and here's why.
Can I take a time out and do a gush for a second?
Yes.
There's no narrating voice. There's no opening crawl of exposition. Whoever wrote this thing was so committed to the art of show don't tell that I never felt put off by the weight of all of the new story elements. Like, you're just dumped into this world and you're curious about what's happening, but there's never a character like sitting there lecturing you about all the things you need to know in order to understand what's happening here. Yep. It's just organic.
There's no
just
expo
flashbacks and interactions.
All right, let me go on a tangent for a second. I think a great example of this is Jace, who is this privileged guy up in Piltover that is doing forbidden research into magic, because we're all about technology. Magic is bad. This is kind of the general vibe that you get.
Yeah, but he had an experience in his past.
Exactly. That's what I was going to talk about. It's like, why is this guy going against the grain and breaking the rules? And then you see this story where him and his mom were for some reason lost in the wilderness in the snow, and some random mage walks up. His mom had passed out. They were going to die of hypothermia, no doubt about it.
And he used magic and rescue them.
He used magic, teleported them to some paradise when he was just a kid, saw this, and the guy walked off into the sunset. And that just put this seed into Jace's brain that magic can be used for the good. And man, he's just going to ride that horse until it dies.
So that's such a beautiful motivator for his character. Like, he saw that magic can be used for good, and therefore he needs to pursue it at any cost. Like, I need to get it, I need to make it happen, and I need to get it into the hands of the people because it can be used for good. And yeah, he never really asks, like, if I were to do this and make it available, what's the risk? And there are people around who know the risk.
So that's Heimerdinger. He is our. Yeah. He's not a
he's
human.
He's our Yoda.
He's our Yoda. He's like this furry creature who is awesome and upbeat and just a great character overall. But he's been around for centuries,
900 years,
something like that. And he mentions offhandedly the tyranny of the mages. And so he experienced something in his life where it was clear that it was a mageocracy where people with the power held it all and they were tyrannical about it. And so he is very wary about introducing magic back into society.
This is a classic tension that exists in the real world and in plots like these, where you have the old person that remembers what happened when the bad guys got their hands on the power, and then they misuse that knowledge. They're like, therefore, we should not have access to power.
Yeah, I've only ever seen this used badly, therefore it must be bad.
Yes. And that's one of the questions. That's another brilliant thing about this is it has so many interesting ideas. It isn't just about one thing. And one of the questions is, should we or shouldn't we have access to this increased power? The bad guys want to use it for bad. The good guys want to use it for good. Are we better off just not having it all, or should we have it and try to control it?
Yeah, we went off on this tangent, and where Jace's story is very much about the introduction of magic through technology into society and the good that it can do, and then his kind of rise to power. He's this very earnest, very trying to do the right thing, but he's kind of shoved into this authority role. And you're seeing him struggle with like the idea of, I want to make things better and I'm the right guy, but should I be as tyrannical or should I be taking this power this way? And that's very interesting plot.
Let's push through the plot synopsis. So that's the first act. Basically, at the end of the first act, Jace is successful in harnessing the magic.
But that's not even the story I like the most. The story I like the most is the kids. It's Vi got in trouble. Vi and her gang did some highbrow thing. Like, it got a lot of attention. And you come to find out that
they planned a heist that intersected their world with Jace's.
Yes, and it ended up going really bad because the magic was unstable and blew up a building. And so now the chief of police goes to Vander, and you realize, holy crap! Like the de facto head of the underground, and the chief of police in the Shining City are in cahoots, and they're doing their best to keep the back channels open in order to avert disaster.
That's great.
Which is two people meeting. Like, we just want to keep the peace. We don't want people to get hurt. So let's figure out a way to work out our differences without having to hang anybody. But they're like, this was too high profile. I need somebody to take the fall for this. And Vander, being this de facto parent figure to these girls that he scooped up off of the bridge when their parents died in his uprising, was going to sacrifice himself for this thing. But that goes sideways when Silco sees this as an opportunity to disrupt the status quo and kidnaps Vander. And so now Vi with her little gang are going to go try to break him out. Powder, you're too little. This is too important. You stay here. And this entire time, Powder/Jinx has been struggling with this idea of, I want to help. I am here. I can do this. Please let me try. And so then she's told to her face, you can't help. You're worthless. Stay here. And then she shows up and, like, right at the cusp of Vi's little gang going to break Vander out, and they're holding their own. But Powder thinks it's going bad, and so she sets off another bomb. Oh, man, and she kills two of the gang, hurts Vi, hurts Vander, and then she's so proud of herself. Like, the conflict ended with, like, 2 people dead. Oh, 3 people dead. Vander died saving Vi. Another great thing. Vander was faced with this choice again, where he could kill Silco or he could save Vi. And he gave up on revenge to save Vi because that's the kind of person he is. And he died rescuing her. And then Powder runs up to Vi, cradling her father figure, dead on the street, like, I did it. I helped. I saved the day. Like, everybody's dead because of you. And then Vi, who's just old enough to try to grasp the bigger situation, understands that that Powder screwed this all up, but Powder's still the little kid. She was just trying to help, and all she saw instead was everybody died because of her, and Vi, her sister, punched her in the face and then disappeared forever. Unbeknownst to Powder, Vi gets basically kidnapped by the new chief of police and thrown into jail for years and years and years. And then she is just having this complete emotional breakdown in the alley. And then Silco shows up with his gang of thugs, and Powder dives into him, hugging, just the nearest adult, like, please save me from these bad feelings. Yeah. And this is what makes Silco the best.
It goes back to Hook. It's the ultimate revenge on your nemesis, adopting their child and making them love you.
I don't think that's what it was. I think what this was is Powder,
he didn't want to do it at first. His cronies talked him into it.
Silco's first thought was to kill Powder or torture to figure out where Vi was, because Vi was the bigger problem.
Right.
But Powder said something that resonated with Silco's character. And then you see this transformation happen where he's shocked that she dove into him in the first place, like looking for comfort. Says this thing that resonates with his character, and then he just like wraps her in his arms. He says, "We'll show them." And like immediately he resonated so hard with the feelings that this little girl was having that they just became like he saw himself in her, and now he's going to take responsibility for it.
So that's what's happening in the underworld. In the overworld, the government is grappling with this decision about someone has delved again into the arcane arts. They've shown that the power exists. Can we suppress it or do we allow it? And they decide to suppress it, but due to a breakthrough, they're basically failed to do that, and then we end the first act. Magic is now reintroduced into the world. The underworld insurrection has kind of failed. Some of the leadership has died. The balance of power has changed. Now, fast forward, what, like 3 years?
No, more than that. They went from little kids to like old teenagers.
So fast forward 7 years.
Yeah. Like a long time.
It was good. I liked this plot device to jump forward in the second act. Now the technology's been started to implement in society. Violet spent the last 6 years in prison. The underworld balance of power has changed, and that's transformed the society. Jinx has kind of started to come into her own and decide what she wants now that she's been betrayed by her family, and now enter the second act.
Well, and Silco this is why I love Silco so much. He becomes he's the bad guy. He's the antagonist, and he takes over the underworld and the power vacuum that Vander left behind. And the underworld has gotten worse. Like, drugs are prevailing, crime is on the rise, and he's just, instead of a benevolent leader of the underground, he is now a kingpin of crime, and that's kind of how the underworld turned out to be.
Yeah, and in the second act, there's a little bit of the usual, like, multiple competing gangs kind of vying for power and deciding who's going to be the strongest kingpin.
But man, through all of this, we have Jinx, who was Powder, with this very fragile, like, mental state because she killed all of her friends, being raised by this guy who's 100% about like the adversity that we face is going to forge us into better tools and better weapons to get what we want. Like,
it's really lawful evil.
Yeah, but he's raising Jinx to be this person. He's like, we're going to show them.
He's trying to justify the wounds that he suffered in his past through raising her after that belief system.
And like, they're both ultra violent. They both kill at the drop of a hat. But you see this such tender father-daughter relationship between the two.
Yeah.
Like, she is crazy violent and sketchy and just like bouncing all over the walls, but then she still is the one that just ever so delicately like puts the medicine into his eyeball directly. And like, it's just this weird tension that exists.
I like the way they invested in those quiet moments between them.
It really reinforces this weird father-daughter
tender father-daughter relationship.
Yes. Ugh. And then Vi gets basically broken out of prison by somebody who's trying to figure out if Silco's the bad guy. And so now Vi is back out in the world. And
Kate becomes a new story arc. Yeah.
Kate, well, and this is the relationship between
and
Kate
I like
Vi.
Kate's story because she's the fish out of water. She's coming down from the high tower into the underworld to try to solve this mystery, and finds out that the people down there aren't what she thought they were, and their problems aren't being caused by what she thought they were, and she realized she was lied to, and now she has to make some decisions to go against the laws and rules and assumptions of her society because of the new knowledge that she's gained.
And at the same time, she's like, we get our buddy cop kind of roles with her and Vi, and Vi kind of opening Kate's eyes to the reality of the world, and then at the same time Kate helping Vi resolve all this unresolved trauma that exists in her
it's
past.
Happening both ways, and that's another beautiful thing about it. Like, people from up in the what do you say the name of the city was again? Piltover. The people up in Piltover aren't as inhuman as you thought they were either.
Right, and it's and then, like, Vi's whole thing is she's just trying to find her little sister Powder. But she's Jinx now, and she's clearly the bad guy. But Jinx is still wanting to find Vi. And when they finally meet up, They like this Powder's still just dying for acceptance from Vi, and there's Kate. Like, wait, who's that? You've already
really
replaced
earned
me.
this moment. Like there's this joyous reunion, and then there's a little bit of reluctance, and then there's this determination if there's going to be atonement and forgiveness, and ultimately it fails.
Oh, because of, again, like there's this unresolved. Vi is trying to resolve her trauma and work through it. Jinx is not. Jinx's father figure is just having her use that as fuel for the fire. And so she's still very broken. And Powder / Jinx looking for Vi's acceptance. But then Vi shows up for the first time in years with another number 2, with another friend, with somebody else that's already in her life. And now Jinx just immediately identifies, like, this is my competition. You have replaced me already with someone else that you think is better or more capable than me. And like all it does is then feed back into this idea that she's held on to since she was a little kid, that she's not good enough, that she's a problem, that she only makes things worse.
So Jace has an apprentice named Victor who has his own story arc that starts to take prominence here, where he's trying to use the magic, the arcane arts that he's tapped into to create something good. Yeah,
it was the combination of, Victor and Jace worked together to really unlock the potential of the magic that Jace had started down the road. And Jace is very good. Like, he's the poster child because he's, tall and handsome and very charismatic. And Victor is like, he has a debilitating like disease, and he like has this cane. He's not very fun to look at. He's a nerd's nerd. He's not good at talking to people. But at no point do you ever feel like Jace is pushing Victor off to the background. Jace is so vested in them being partners in this whole thing. And it's just great to see that. And Victor wants the magic to help him personally, specifically, because he's going to die of this wasting illness that he has.
It's a two-way relationship, too. I mean, it's not just Victor needs Jace. At one point, Jace is in desperation and is standing on the precipice about to commit suicide, and Victor pulls him back.
And then Jace returns the favor several years later.
Now, Jace's story arc takes an interesting turn when he gets elected to the governing council of Piltover, and he now is kind of transitioning from being an obscure scientist from, albeit a wealthy family, to now coming to prominence and power and having to transition away from his ideas of creating technology that makes society better to using the power that's been thrust upon him to try to influence greater things.
Oh, and I love this so much. He's mentored through this by another council member where he is coming up as this earnest, I want to make the world a better place kind of person. And through the circumstances of being in power, you see her wear him down. Like, that's not how it works. You're going to get run over. You're going to fail in this government if you don't scratch some people's backs. And so Jace is slowly making these compromises to his morality in order to achieve what he thinks is the ultimate good.
But he's trying to hold on to his virtue. Like, you can see the conflict. He doesn't just want to become a corrupt politician. He still has the values that got him where he was, and he wants to hold to those.
Man, Ben, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and you can see Jace walking down this road.
Okay, so then what would you say is a transition to the third act? That's not as clear as a 7-year gap in time to the second act.
I think this is when we have the real conversation where Silco comes forward as this antagonist to Piltover, because Jinx is just causing mayhem in the ivory tower.
So there's an event that happens on the bridge, and open war breaks out between Piltover and the Undercity, and then that's the transition to the third act. The sheriff dies, all the under the table dealings are over, and it erupts into open war again.
Cool. Complete tangent is Vander, the good leader of the Undercity, died in the first act, and also so did the first sheriff that worked with Vander. She also died, and we were replaced with Silco, who was a crime boss, and then the deputy sheriff Marcus, who at the time was hardcore, like, you're lawbreakers, I'm going to throw you in jail.
Yeah, he has an interesting little mini arc where he's kind of considering what he's done.
Yeah, where he kind of realizes all the morality that he had to compromise because he thought things were black and white, and it was his older mentor, the other sheriff, that was trying to clue him in. That's not how the real world works. And then he had to make a ton of way more compromises, arguably, than the previous sheriff, because now he's got to work with Silco instead of Vander.
Okay, so let's get through the third act, and then there's a few things I want to go back and touch on.
Oh, man. And so The big one is then Piltover and the Undercity are in open rebellion, and it's Silco and Jace end up on this walkway discussing how we're going to make this work. And Silco's like, we want to be an independent nation. We want separate but equal treatment. Like these concessions. Yeah. And then
Silco's
Jace says,
manifesto.
Yeah, and Jace says, okay, I can get you this, but I need the fall person. I need the one that's causing all this mayhem so I can string them up and show everyone that it's going to be okay.
He wants Jinx.
And
that
Jinx.
Puts Silco in the position where he's like, do I give up my daughter for everything that I want? He's lawful evil. Is he going to...
And he has this great scene. Oh, Ben, this great scene where Silco is sitting on the rim of a fountain in the Undercity that they had constructed to Vander as their previous leader and the guy that kept everything great. And he's having this conversation with his dead friend, who at one point they shared this dream, but then they broke off because Vander said it wasn't worth it. And now Silco is faced with giving up, and he genuinely cares for Jinx. And you can see him struggling with like, he offered me everything that I have ever wanted. I just have to give up this thing.
All I have to do is give up my daughter.
I just have to give up this thing that I didn't know would make me whole. And he's finally resonating with his friend that he killed. And it's just this breaking moment.
Okay, I need you to explain something to me. Okay. There's one flashback that I think they assumed we'd be able to connect and just kind of floats detached in my brain. It's the origin story of Silco's transformation from like this maybe chaotic, good, aligned person to lawful evil.
This is the Silco's...
It's something happened in the water. I don't understand who the characters were and what the problem was. Will you explain it to me?
All right, so the problem was, this is when it was after the uprising, the failed uprising back in the day, okay? It was Silco and Vander that had orchestrated this thing.
They're young, they're in their early 20s, full of piss and vinegar and want to change the world.
And this is where Vander decided it wasn't worth it. He's already adopted Vi and Powder. And this is the conversation he's trying to have with Silco, who is his partner, his blood brother, in this fight against the oppressors. He's trying to convince Silco it's not worth it.
This is the good-evil break between Vander and Silco.
Yeah, and Vander's trying to explain to him, this is like what we are trying to achieve isn't worth it. But Silco, all he hears is his blood brother abandoning him, is giving up on this dream that they had because he doesn't have the
Vander
other piece.
Try to kill him at that point?
Yes, because Vander knew that Silco was going to stop at nothing to achieve this, and he was going to cause so much death and misery that there was no other choice but to take Silco out of the picture. And so Vander, being the ginormous dude that he is, tried to kill Silco by drowning him in this ridiculously polluted lake. And Silco, Vander saw this as a really sad moment where he had to kill his brother in order to prevent more loss. Silco saw it as the ultimate betrayal and the thing that forged him into the crime boss that he is today. Because as he was drowning, and he gives this whole big eloquent speech to Jinx about it, you will never feel more alive, and you will never feel more empowered than when you are fighting for your life. Because he was able to get a knife or a shard of glass or something and fight his way off of Vander and then escape. He had this, the pollution in the river, and he had this open wound on his face that just totally screwed up his eyeball for the rest of his life. But he saw this as his moment when he was forged into a weapon. And he's constantly trying to give that to Jinx.
I got a hot take.
Okay.
I think whether inadvertently or deliberately, the creators of this show wanted to fix some of the poorly executed plot lines in the Star Wars series. Ooh. That moment you described is Kylo Ren and Luke.
Oh, yes. Okay. I can get behind that. Star Wars did it terribly. Arcane did it right. Yes.
The other moment is Jinx as probably Anakin Skywalker, where there's this moment where they want to do the right thing and they're starting to feel the power that could come into their life if they just embrace it, and they could go either way, and then they end up going the wrong way.
Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, you need to go watch the Clone Wars cartoons from start to finish. Again, each individual episode is for little kids, but it forms a dot on a canvas that paints this wonderful picture of the transition of Anakin Skywalker from a Jedi Knight to a Sith Lord.
I'm sure the creators of Arcane have seen and consumed all of that. Whether that just influenced their decisions and how they created the story, or they were like, let's do this ourselves, but let's do it right.
Okay, and this brings us to the ultimate... Oh, this was just so good, because Jinx... Okay, Jinx wants to reconcile with Vi, but she's got this new friend. Jinx still isn't good enough for Vi. That's one side. The other side is she's got Silco, her de facto father, who she overheard talking to the statue of Vander about how I can get everything I want. All I've got to do is give up Jinx. And so now she's torn. Like, I don't know what to do. And so she creates this very Joker-esque scenario where she kidnaps all the key players. Vi, Kate. Kate was there, but Kate was very deliberately gagged.
Periphery.
So she couldn't talk.
Yeah.
Like, she's just one of the players here, and everybody acknowledges that. And then Silco was there. And then Jinx set up this crazy, like, Russian roulette scenario. It's like, okay, explain to me, should I go with you and be this good person that you've always wanted me to be and, like, prove it to me that you want that? Or should I just continue to be this person's, like, number one henchman and daughter? And this episode was so tense because of Jinx's fragile mental state combined with these such high stakes and characters that you just love so much.
I agree. I think that creators created the tension by making you as the viewer want Jinx to be redeemed and stringing you along the whole time, believing that it's possible.
So I was vested in this scene because, from my perspective, nobody's wrong here. Nobody in this room has done the wrong thing.
Everybody's motivations are valid. That's what makes for good tension in a plot.
Yes.
Not just to have like this crazy outlandish bad guy that you can't understand and doesn't make any sense.
Silco was he was Thanos from the Marvel Universe. Like, he's a bad guy. Yeah. He's objectively doing bad things, but you can understand where he's coming from. You understand his motivation.
One of Silco's lines was the base violence necessary for change. He just recognized the cost of achieving the world he wanted, and he was willing to pay it.
Yes. And this is... so we're in this room of all these characters that we're deeply vested in, and somebody, if not everybody, is going to die. And, like, just that whole scene, I'm on the edge of my seat waiting to see what's going to happen. And like, he lets Vi talk first, and I love this so much because Vi keeps calling her Powder, and like, you're not this person. You can come back. You can be redeemed. And then as soon as Jinx takes the gag off of Silco, he screams at Vi. Her name is Jinx, and she's perfect the way she is.
Yeah.
And I love that so much.
It's like the scene in the throne room where Luke's telling Darth that you're my father, you're not evil, you can come away from this, and the Emperor goes, ha ha ha, he's perfect the way he is.
Oh, but it just reinforces.
I'm telling you, they just fixed the Star Wars story.
Maybe that's why I love it so much. But at the same time, like, just Silco being peak awesome dad in that moment, just like, stop it, she's perfect. Stop telling her that she's wrong and broken. Okay.
Is that it for the plot synopsis?
Well, how does it... We're going to spoil how it ends?
Yeah, obviously.
Oh, it was so... Oh, Ben. I almost cried. I almost actually cried because then Silco breaks out of his bonds, grabs the gun on the table and points it at Vi. And in a complete knee-jerk reaction, Jinx shoots and kills Silco. Realizes, like, seconds after the bullets left her gun, she drops the gun and runs over to him like, no, I'm sorry, I can fix it. And Silco, with his dying breath, tells her, you are perfect, don't change, and then dies. And it's just so crushing. Like, did he use his last words for spite? Did he use his last words to curse his enemies? No. He used his last breath to try to make his daughter feel better about herself.
Okay, so now imagine that happened in Star Wars. Instead of this weird, unearned, poorly done deathbed redemption for Anakin Skywalker, imagine instead that the Emperor with his dying breath tells Darth Vader that he's the perfect Sith and that cements his will to be the ultimate lawful evil. Yeah.
That's how Sith apprentices become Sith lords, is they have to kill their master. And so, I can see a scenario where the Emperor Palpatine is hanging from Darth Vader's hand over the edge, like, you're the master now, and then Darth, like, hucks him down into the thing. That would have been perfect.
So, it was kind of bleak in the end. I guess I was hoping for a little bit of catharsis and redemption, but I wasn't dissatisfied with what they gave me. In the end, it left me wanting more. And it's kind of stuck with me.
The last scene is oh man, the Piltover Council ruling to give the Undercity everything that they want, even though they didn't get Jinx. Like, we have to do this. We have to recognize them. It's just going to get worse if we don't. And then Jinx firing this magically powered... Okay, another thing. She's a technology expert. She's a little bit crazy, which actually makes her understand this crap better than other people do, which is just a great plot device. And she fires this
She fires the Death Star, Josh, in the end. She fires the Death Star.
Brings magic into the world in order to improve people's lives, and it was stolen by Jinx and turned into the ultimate weapon, and she fires it right at the building where the council's meeting at that moment. It's just perfect.
Yeah, she blows up Alderaan. Yeah. Okay. Rewind. People, if you haven't got it yet, you got to watch this thing. I don't know why you'd listen to us spoil all the plot and then do it. So I assume you either have no intention of watching it and you're still listening, or you've already watched it and you're enjoying the discussion. So I hope it's that second one. Okay, I want to go back and do some random things that I got from my notes along it. First of all, it was so good. It wasn't in a hurry. It wasn't trying too hard. It shocked me. I didn't know we could still do this. I thought everything needed to be derivative or a sequel or trying too hard or what. I mean, all the recent Marvel offerings have just been so desperate that this just was so refreshing. Something new that I wasn't expecting that was just good.
I've heard people make comparisons of this to Game of Thrones in that the world feels alive and that all of these characters have real motivations.
It felt lived in and in depth. It really felt like that.
And the story isn't driven by random things that are happening. The story is driven by characters that have overlapping and intersecting motivations.
Okay, I want to give a bad example of that. Did you see Ant-Man Quantumania?
Oh, I did see Ant-Man.
That was a great example of them wanting to have this, but not getting it. Like, you go to another world, and it's supposed to be another world and feel lived in, and it just felt hollow and shallow and not earned.
It felt random, and I didn't know the rules, and it was just, okay, I guess anything can happen here. We don't really care anymore.
Okay. So at the heart of the conflict of the first act is this idea of like there's some technology, some power that we're trying to harness and create. The guys that were seeking for it, their motivation was very pure. It was that we want to unlock the Arcane so that we can put it in the hands of the people and make their lives better. We want to improve trade. We want to make medicine better. We want to make the world a better place.
Okay, I have to put this in here because the creators of the show knew exactly what they were doing, okay? And one of the things we didn't talk about was Victor is constantly trying to use the magic to better himself. Like
Chase doesn't know the extent of Victor's injuries and the imminence of his death.
Okay, so here's a couple of things. One, as Victor is pursuing this, like his assistant gets caught up in one of his experiments and dies. Like she is vaporized, whereas he is empowered.
Yeah,
and like he doesn't use
that was anymore. A really poignant scene. She's coming down the hall reciting to herself her speech she's going to give him because she likes him so much, and she comes in the room and he's so wrapped up in his experiment that he accidentally kills her.
Okay, Ben, here is the thing that I want to put in here. The creators of the show knew exactly what they were doing because Victor is a hero in League of Legends. You don't need to know League of Legends to get all the good stuff out of the show. But here's the thing. Victor as a hero in League of Legends is a cyborg, and his title is Victor, Herald of the Machine God. And so just knowing that and nothing else just creates this, like, almost like in the prequels of the Star Wars movie. Like, you know where this is going to go, and it's nowhere
I'm kind of glad I wasn't burdened by the expectation of knowing his character and where he was going to end up. Just like you said, watching the Star Wars prequels, knowing that Jake Lloyd is going to turn into Darth Vader. Like, that didn't help my viewing of it.
So it was still interesting to see where Victor was going and how he got there, but I knew that everything that he was doing was going to go down a bad path.
Okay. So you can see the values of the people involved. There's Heimerdinger, who has seen that magic can be used for evil also, and that the cost of having the bad people having access to power is so great that it's worth preventing it. So the council is set against it. They decided to, once the explosion happened, they confiscate all of Jace's experiments. They're going to destroy them. He feels like his life is over. You cut to Vander with Vi and her involvement with it, and he says nobody wins in a war, Vi. Like, you think you want war to change things, but the cost of change is too great. On the other hand, Silco says the cost of change is just what we have to do. We have to be committed. Violence is the base violence necessary for change.
I love Silco as a character.
At some point, Silco says the only way to stop a superior enemy is to stop at nothing, to become what they fear. You've seen this time and time again throughout history on both sides.
So there was a scene where Jinx was fighting with Vi and a bunch of the enforcers on the bridge, and she gets critically wounded. Like, she's laying there dying. And you see Silco come up, see the remnants of this whole battle, and like immediately go diving to save her. Like, anything at any cost, I need to save my daughter. And like, it's just this. Yes, he's a crime lord. Yes, he has killed so many people, and yes, he is ruthless in the extraction of trying to get to his goals. But he genuinely loves this broken girl, and it's just so great, and I love it every time.
Okay. Now, her story becomes a tragedy. Maybe you and I had a different feeling about this, but I always wanted Powder to be redeemed. You could see the misunderstanding at the heart of her genesis as an evilly aligned character. She's always kind of chaotic. She's kind of like chaotic neutral, I think. But you can sympathize with Vi's desire to reconcile with Jinx and have her come back to being Powder.
Well, and this is the thing. So what informed these two characters the most is the very last interaction they had as children. Is Vi saw her whole world destroyed by something that Powder did, and she punched Powder in the face. And she's a brawler. She punches people a lot in the show.
I forgot that part. I forgot she punched her.
She punched her in the face and told her, like, you destroyed everything. You are at fault for everything that has happened. And she did this in a fit of rage, in a fit of loss over her father figure.
Right. She obviously regretted it later, having said that to her sister. She
regretted it almost immediately. She turned to try to go back and save her when the cop grabbed her and threw her in jail for 6 years. So Vi's entire motivation is to make amends for that terrible thing that she did to her sister.
It was a weak moment. It was a tragedy. It was a little girl. She made a mistake. I forgive her.
Meanwhile, we have this little girl who takes... Imagine back when you were a kid and the little things just hit you so hard.
This is it. This is why this story resonates so much. Because, it's specific to this story.
Oh,
but this could be anyone.
Your big sister, the person that you have emulated, that you want to be, punches you in the face and tells you you're worthless and then disappears from your life forever. Like, that's such a traumatic thing that happened that her psyche shattered.
Yeah. And that sounds so specific, and yet it's kind of transferable. Like, as a kid, you could be either one. You're the person that says something rash to someone that you loved in a moment of weakness, or you're the person that maybe someone said something to you that they didn't mean or wasn't entirely true, but you internalized it and became your whole identity. Like, you can see her teetering on the precipice of going either way, of being able to forgive and reconcile, or being able to double down and decide that it was the truth.
And there's also a non-zero number of people in the world that have said or done something that they regret and then never had the opportunity to take back, either because that person left their life or because that person died or whatever the circumstances were. Just having that guilt and that crushing sense of, I wish I could have done things differently.
Okay, I want to take a couple of meta tangents. One is, did you binge this or did you pace yourself on it?
So the first time
I'm going somewhere specific with this.
Okay, the first time I watched it, I binged it because I couldn't stop. I had to know what happened.
Watched every episode one right after the other?
Binged it like I was supposed to. I was physically in an office where I was doing accounting work, but watching the show on my phone instead.
Okay. Okay. So we came from traditional methods of in the past. This might have come out on like Cartoon Network or something like that, where they release episode every week or stuff like that, and there's this natural break that's introduced here. This story followed a 3-act structure, and after the third episode, when you transition from act 1 to act 2, and there's a 6-year time gap, there's a big cliffhanger in this story. The problem is, if you can just pick it up and immediately watch the next episode, what's the point? What's the point of even writing a cliffhanger into the story if there's no enforced timeout? I'm serious. Okay. I think it's a failure as a writer to write in a cliffhanger if you can immediately watch the next thing and they release it all at once.
Okay, so are cliffhangers an antiquated trope because of binge watching society?
Yes.
Huh. Okay. All right, so actually, I will say this. This is nothing to do with Arcane. My wife and I are watching this reality TV show series that's probably bad for us. It's called Below Decks, and it's about the crew on mega yachts. And it's just like watching them like, oh, these people pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to go on this, 180-foot yacht for 3 days. And it's just about
the servants?
It's about the servants that are making their food, that are like cleaning the place.
That sounds interesting.
But it's an hour-long show, and every episode ends on that cliffhanger. They want that hook, like, oh, we got to watch the next episode. We have changed our viewing habit of this show so that instead of watching one episode and then stopping and going to bed, we watch the second half of one episode and the first half of a next episode and then shut it off and go to bed.
So you have deliberately circumvented their distribution method to kind of disarm their psychological torture they're using against you.
Yes, there's no such thing as a cliffhanger the way we consume the show.
So that's done on purpose where they're just trying to get you to binge it. I saw something written that basically said that the ability of people to binge watch things has reduced the overall impact of it on society because, like if you're standing around the water cooler the next day talking about the cliffhanger of your favorite episode of X-Files or whatever, it has a little bit of resonance in society. There's time. When Lord of the Rings was released every Christmas 3 years in a row, you couldn't just go down to the theater and watch the next episode immediately. You had to think about it and talk about it and stuff. And if you'd watched episode 4 where it ended with that big cliffhanger, and then you couldn't immediately just pick it up, you're going to think about it. It's going to resonate with you. It's going to have a little more impact on you.
Yeah, this is why I was watching it during work hours when I was supposed to be doing billable work because I couldn't handle it. Like, there's no chance I'm getting through this day without thinking about what the crap happened to Vi after she went to prison, punching Powder in the face.
Okay, I want to get one gripe in here, and that is that what the heck kind of government system did Piltover have where they could just immediately elect a brand new member of a council that never existed, throw off the balance of power, change the numbers? Like, what government even was this?
It was a council government. It was a classic D&D government where we have 5 people that are in charge, and then they just do whatever they want.
But not even all the other counselors were on board. They're like, where did you come from? How did you get power? Your family isn't one of the chosen families. No one died.
Well, that was his girlfriend on the council that was like manipulating and coercing to try to get him on the council because he was super popular for being the guy that brought magic to society and made everybody's lives better. Like, you know what?
So we haven't talked about Counselor Medarta at all. What's your take on her character and her plot thread?
Ooh, lawful neutral.
What a lawful neutral.
Yes, she is. Like her mom.
She was like kind of a hollow, shallow character to me until her mother showed up, and then it made a lot of sense.
Yes, she was the ultimate. She was very much a diplomat. Very much like this is how politics works. This is how you get things done in a society that has varying, intersecting motivations at this high level. Yeah. And she was kind of Jace's mentor / puppet master because the reason she brought him onto the council is because he was super popular and she was very intimate with him and she could definitely control
so she can manipulate him. So she brought him onto the council. I thought she was just going to turn out to be a secret mole and in cahoots with Silco or whatever. So it was interesting that she never really was. Like, her purposes were her own. She wasn't a tool of someone else. So she never turned out to just be this evil mole.
Yeah. And then her mom shows up from this barbaric culture where we just kill people. And, like, diplomacy is not valued at all, which makes perfect sense for a diplomat to come out of that.
And prance around naked in front of people as a show of, like, a show of force.
Which goes back then to the art style. Holy crap, Ben. So the animators of the Spider-Verse are classic in saying that you can freeze frame any single frame of this movie and it looks like it came from a comic book. This show, you can freeze any single frame and it feels like an oil painting. And it feels like it's totally unique in its art style. And I love it so much. I cannot get enough of how well that they made this show look.
Yeah. I want to go back to this world and I want to hear more of this story, but I hope that they don't rush it and fail to deliver.
Season 2 comes out this summer. You are in luck, sir. They have made another one.
Timing, and it's going to be great. Podcast. The writers and creators of this story were so good at the show don't tell. There's this beautiful montage of Jace under Medarta's tutelage as he's learning to be a politician, where he's shaking hands and kissing babies, and you can kind of see the realization on his face as he's coming alive to the possibilities of this newfound power in his world.
Oh, even like they do everything, every single thing they show don't tell. Like we never had to have that stupid expo dump from Medarta talking to Jace about, oh, this guy has these motivations, these guys have these motivations.
Yeah.
They showed them interacting with each other in
them.
such subtle ways that you completely understood each one of these people.
All right. And all these subplots aren't undercooked. Sometimes I thought they were going to be, and then you'd get a little bit of fleshing out. Another one I really liked is the character of Sheriff Marcus, who is this corrupt cop that was colluding with the underworld, colluding with Silco in the underworld.
But he wasn't at
second
first.
Thoughts.
He was the deputy that was so hardcore.
Yeah, and then he just kind of found some personal interest in colluding with Silco to like get a little bit on the side and also get his job done without so much friction. And then at some point Silco starts to recognize, and he says to his cronies, "We're losing him. We're losing our corrupt cop that's our insider in the upper world. He's starting to grow a conscience, and he's not going to be there for long. We'll keep using him as long as we can, but he's not going to be there forever."
Okay, how tense were you when Marcus was slowly opening the door to his daughter's room, and his daughter's sitting there playing a game, and then as he continues to open the door,
Silco was there playing with his daughter.
Silco there being super nice to his daughter. Like how nervous did you get in that moment? Like oh no. Like just
it's the classic mobster pretending to be nice to your family as a veiled threat of violence towards your most vulnerable point.
Whew. Man, I remember my whole body was tense. Like my whole body's tense now thinking about that scene.
Okay, this is one of my favorite tropes that I think plays really well. It is the trope that was done really well by Bruce Willis in 16 Blocks. Have you seen that movie?
I have not, no.
Okay. Oh, dang.
Oh, go ahead and say it anyway. I don't care.
Okay, so it's a cop drama that starts off with Bruce Willis as an alcoholic, and you don't know why he is, and then they need to transport this state witness of some internal corruption in the police department from the lockup in the jail to the courthouse to testify against some crooked cops. And due to some coincidences, he ends up guarding this guy. Anyway, over the course of the story, it's revealed that he's one of the people that the guy's going to testify against. And the reason he's become an alcoholic is he's gotten in so far into the cop corruption that he couldn't find a way out, but he wanted one.
Oh.
And now this is a chance at deathbed redemption for him in that he can deliver the witness who will send him to jail safely to the courthouse instead of letting the other cops murder him. And I kind of feel like that's the arc that Sheriff Marcus gets here. Like, he's gone too far. He wishes he could take it back. And ultimately, he kind of can give at the end what he can, even though he can't really take it all back.
Ooh. All right. That's a fantastic synopsis of Marcus's character. And I love, like, even him. He feels like a tertiary character, but he's so well fleshed out that you understand him and his motivations and how it feeds the plot. Everything is in service to the story. I want to talk for a second, because we haven't talked about this at all, is the action scenes. How good are the action scenes in this show, Ben?
I was watching them and thinking of you.
Oh, you jerk.
I thought Josh is really going to be impressed by this. I don't get as big of a thrill as you do out of creative use of the magic system and the physics to create awesome situations. Like, I get rule 0 of Sanderson's laws of magic. I get that when you create these energy-based weapons and these flying machines and these powers that make you grow into rage monsters and all of that, you throw it into an arena, it creates awesome battle scenes. I get that. I don't tend to get impressed by that.
Okay.
I like that it moves the plot forward and creates interactions between the characters. It was fine.
That's what I want to talk about. There is one specific action scene. Like, all the action scenes are great, but there's one that is so good because it drives the plot and it reinforces all these other things we're talking about. And that's when Vi and Jace end up getting together, because they're both kind of this reckless person, right? They're on their own. They're just prone to action, overthinking. And then they put these two together in a room, and Jace is frustrated that the council won't act, and Vi is frustrated that the council won't act. They're like, you know what? We can just go down there and kick some butt. And Jace kind of like, you know what? Let's do it. And they do. And they go down to one of the drug production
That wasn't
facilities.
an action scene. That was a deliberation in the council room.
No, now I'm talking about when Vi and Jace together with his magically charged
I liked that.
weapons. They went down to the drug scene and they had this giant fight with all these bad guys. And this was this was the perfect part about this. Like, all right, so one, the action scene was fantastic. The animation was great. It looked so good. They did all the things right. It just felt like a great fight scene. And then at the very end,
I didn't dislike any of that.
Well, Jason's got this smile on his face, like, yes, I'm finally doing something. I'm finally acting. I'm finally making a difference. And then he accidentally kills one of the child workers that had been enslaved to work there.
Yeah, and completely had a crisis of conscience, which was so consistent with his character's alignment.
Yes, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, that action scene.
He's like, I'm lawful good, but I'm going to dabble a little bit into chaotic because I recognize that removes some of the limitations that were preventing me from achieving my aims. And then once the chaos had the predictable outcome, he was like, ooh, let me go back to the lawful part. I didn't like this.
This is what I want to. This is the drum that I want to beat. Okay, is that this action scene was not inserted into the show for the sake of having an action scene and breaking up the pacing.
It's definitely not Michael Bay action.
It served the plot from start to finish, and it informed the characters, and it progressed, and it all made sense. And it was chef's kiss perfect.
Fair. I think that's a good place to bring it to a close. Listeners, if we haven't made it clear, this gets the highest possible Bad at Magic recommendation. I hope they don't let me down. I can't wait for more. It stuck with me. Go watch it, enjoy it, and hopefully when the next season comes out this summer, it'll be more of the same.
This is the only thing that I have ever screamed at the screen for two women to hug each other and start acting like sisters again. Would you two just forgive each other? Like, all of my girly emotions came out because it pulls it out of you. Like, you're so invested in the writing and the characters that you just want it so bad.
You're right, Josh. This was good fiction. This is the kind of fiction that made me forget about the mechanics and the authors and the stories and just be invested in the outcome and the story that they chose to tell about the characters, and I loved it.
Oh, I'm so glad that you finally listened to me and decided to watch this show.
I always do, buddy. All right, listeners, if you had something you want to say about Arcane, we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can go on our subreddit, Reddit/r/bad-at-magic, or go on our Facebook and weigh in on the discussion. We'd love to hear from you.
If you like what we do, consider sharing us with a friend. If you like us, maybe your friends will like us too. If you really want to show us some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket and giving us a good review on the podcast player of your choice. It's amazing the visibility we can get from 1 5-star review, and thank you if you already have. And if you want me to keep forcing Ben to watching amazing things that are 5 years old from now until the end of time, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.